Thank you. Okay, can we have a roll call, please?
Thank you. Representative Bovee?
Here.
Representative Brown?
Here.
Representative Flitner?
Here.
Representative Freeman?
Here.
Representative Hunt?
Here.
Representative Kinner?
Here.
Representative Paxton?
Here.
Representative Piperinen?
Here.
Chairman Northrup?
Here. Thank you, Kathy. So I'd like to welcome everyone. This is going to be quite a little exercise. We hope that we can get all the public comment in the allotted time. Just to give you a quick rundown on that, in case you didn't see it, we're going to explain the bill till about 6:30, and these are about times because it just depends upon how things move along. And then we're going to take public comment on the budget cuts portion of the bill. And then at 7:15, we'll end that, and we'll look at the revenue enhancement sides of the bill and take public comment on that. And then at 8 o'clock, so that's another 45 minutes, we're going to take general public comments. If we just have comments on the bill or on education, we'll take them at that time. And I'd ask that everybody not repeat what the guy in front of you said, because there's a lot of people here and everybody would like to get a chance to talk about it. So we're just going to kind of walk through these, and if somebody said what you wanted to say, you can say ditto, except I think that we ought to do this. But you know, you can make up what you're going to say and work through it. We're going to allow 2 minutes for each time, and Kathy's going to have her timer going. She's got a card up there, and she'll flash it off in 15 seconds towards the end. And so we'll work our way down just so everybody knows where we are in time and we don't get carried away. And then when you get emotional, try to keep it capped up a little bit, because like the guy behind you would like to have his chance too, and getting emotional and yelling and screaming is not going to get anything done. So we'll keep this nice and civil and fair and straight, and we'll work through this. So welcome. And oh yes, you should address the chair all the time. In our procedures that we do this, if Representative Freeman would like to talk, then he says, Mr. Chair, and I say Mr. Freeman or Representative Freeman, and we move through it like that. And we'd like to have the same from you guys if you can, please. A lot of you have been in committee meetings. I recognize a lot of familiar faces. Thank you. And thank you everybody for showing up. This is an important bill. We want to get a lot of public input, and we're really glad to have it here at East High, and we want to thank East High for their helping us get this done. Let's give them a round of applause. The next and last thing is make sure that your cell phones are quieted, just so that we don't have to listen to a new ringtone that we haven't heard before, or bugling elk or ducks squawking or something else. So, all right. With that, we're going to have Matt and Josh from the LSO walk us through the bill. Does everybody have a copy that would like a copy? Okay. Josh?
Okay, Mr. Chairman, so I'll do the first half here, and I think I'll turn it over to Matt, and please feel free to stop us anytime. But with that, we'll just kind of walk through the bill page by page. Some of you have heard this a couple times before, but there's also a lot that haven't. So,
and Josh?
Mr. Chairman.
The committee members have questions. I'm going to have them ask them as we're walking through the bill.
Perfect,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. All right, so with that, Mr. Chairman, our first change here is on page 2, starting on line 18, creating a new subsection B. And what this does is at the end of every year, I'll transfer funds from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account to the Public School Foundation program account. And if you flip over to page 3, Mr. Chairman, starting on line 1, there's a sunset provision here. So this transfer would stop as soon as the amounts in the LSRA drop below $500 million.
There's an acronym that we shouldn't probably, or I will explain. LSRA is Legislative Stabilization Reserve Account. That's our savings account, and that's what we're planning on using to stabilize this bill until we actually get a chance to recalibrate. Not this summer, but the next summer. Go ahead, Josh.
All right, Mr. Chairman, then starting rest of page 3 over to page 4, these are conforming changes for later in the bill. We we're going to repeal the School Foundation Program Reserve Account and some related income swaps that are currently in statute of the federal mineral royalties. And this is just getting rid of some of those references that'll no longer be active. Bottom of page 4, over to page 5. What this does is guarantee a 5% spending policy amount to the Common School Land Income Account. This is from the Common School Permanent Land Fund Spending Policy Reserve Account, and then repeals some of the language there of where those funds used to be transferred. Mr. Chairman, then bottom of page 5, starting on line 15, this changes how average daily membership is calculated. It changes it to a fractional basis. So currently, if you have over 50% ADM, it's counted as a full ADM, and over 25% counts as half. So this would change that to then be counted on actual fractional amount. And that carries over onto top of page 6. Mr. Chairman, then bottom of page 6, starting on line 8 through the remainder of the page, this is conforming technical changes and changing reference to the 2015 cost of education study rather than the 2010. And over again, top of page 7, lines 1 through 6, this again is a conforming change to later in the bill. We're re-promulgating attachment A, and this just changes that reference. Starting on line 8, this has to do with we're taking a 1% severance tax and diverting it from the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund to the general fund, and then swapping general funds into the School Foundation Program account. And this is a temporary transfer of those funds, so this section is repealed on June 30, 2023. Then carrying over then onto page 8, this changes the days of operation for schools from 185 to 180, and that's done through 5 less days of professional development. Over onto page 9, lines 9 through 11, this is just a technical change eliminating some redundant language. Over onto page 10, this implements a moratorium on alternative schools, so there'd be no new alternative schools during the period starting March 15th of 2017 and ending June 30, 2019. Bottom of page 10 on lines 19 and 20. This is just another technical change here, just a reference to attachment A. There are no changes on page 11. On page 12, bottom, lines 22 through 23, and carrying over on the top of page 13, this is changing how court-ordered placement students are counted, and says they can be counted in average daily membership if the district provides education services directly to the student. Bottom of page 13, starting on line 12 and carrying over to the next page, this freezes transportation funding at current amounts, or at the 2016-2017 school year, and that's beginning in school year 2018-2019. And then later on, we'll see that then that will be calibrated through efforts of the Joint Education Committee. Mr. Chairman, then bottom, or halfway through page 14, line 11, doing a similar thing with special education funding, again, effective for school year 2018-2019, and set at amounts in the 2016-2017. They do get 100% of amounts actually expended for tuition outside of the district. On page 15, lines 15 and 16. This is another conforming change. We're repealing some transfers from the school foundation program account to the CapCon account. Over on page 16, lines 13 and 14, this is the 1% severance tax we discussed earlier. This sends that amount to the general fund, and then a like amount will be transferred from the general fund to the school foundation account. Starting on line 16 of that page, this is a half-cent sales tax increase. So take it from 4% to 4.5%. Over on page 17, starting on line 3, you can see that this paragraph is not effective until the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account, the savings account, drops below $500 million, which we're not forecasting to happen in the near future anyway. And then on line 9, then you can see that this new tax would also be repealed on the year following the year that the education mills, the 43 mills, provide at least 65% of the school foundation amount. Over on to page 18, this is the distribution, lines 9 through 12, says that additional half-cent would go to the Public School Foundation program account. Balance of page 18 is the same change to the use tax, so sales and use tax just mirrors the same language. Again, carrying over onto page 19 and through page 20, line 10. Mr. Chairman, then on page 20, line 12, section 2, this is some repeals of existing law. The first line there and carrying over, so 94601, A11 and D8, and then down on line 13, 94719R, and also 2113306.1. Those all have to do with the repeal of the school foundation program reserve account and related investment swaps from federal mineral royalties. The repeal of 2113306C, that's CapCon? That's a transfer from to CapCon from the school foundation account. 2113307A4. This is a repeal of the requirement to have a 16-to-1 student ratio to qualify for school foundation dollars. 2113334. That's a repeal of the funding for extended day and summer school, and that will be folded into the block grant model. That will now be an attachment A rather than categorical funding. And then 2113335, that's a repeal of instructional facilitators. Again, they will also be transferred into the block grant funding rather than categorical funding. 2115122 is a repeal of a transfer from CapCon account to the permanent land fund. And then finally there, we're repealing attachment A, and we're re-promulgating that later on in this bill. Mr. Chairman, then section 3, this is where we required the Joint Education Committee to calibrate the transportation and special education components, which are frozen. That's to be done during the 2017 interim. Over onto page 21, you can see that the committee is authorized to seek out expert opinions there. And then, Mr. Chairman, section 4, bottom of page 21, carrying over to page 22. This is the moratorium on alternative schools. So we provide a little more detail there on what the moratorium is and how that applies. And then starting on page 22, line 20, require the Joint Education Committee to study alternative schools and provide a report no later than November 30 of 2018. Mr. Chairman, then starting on page 23, line 7, this creates a Joint Select Committee on Education Funding. This carries over, the details of this carry over through page 29. I'll kind of walk through some of that. You can see there, line 13 through the end of the page and over onto page 24, line 11, sets up the membership of the committee. Lines 13 through 22 is the appointment of those members. Over on page 25, this is where we set out the duties of this committee. So their first duty there, starting on line 1, is to have a recalibration of the education resource block grant model, as well as review the educational program. Under paragraph or subsection D, they're also required to study solutions to the projected budget shortfall, including options for use of savings, consideration of use of diversions of existing revenue streams, and options to increase revenues. And then finally, bottom of that page, in subsection E, they're also to study school capital construction and major maintenance funding issues. Over onto page 26, directs the formation of 3 subcommittees to address those 3 subtopics on the previous page. Then in subsection G on line 10, they're supposed to solicit input from the School Finance Data Advisory Committee. Also then on subsection H, starting on line 20, the governor is directed to appoint 3 advisory groups to provide input and recommendations to those 3 subcommittees and to the committee itself. Over on page 27, it just provides for staffing of the committee by the Legislative Service Office, and then other agencies are directed to serve in an advisory capacity to the committee. Bottom of page 27 and carrying over to the next page, this provides that they should introduce legislation with their recommendations in time for the 2019 general session. Subsection M authorizes the committee to seek out expert opinions and hire consultants. In subsection N on line 15, you can see they are directed to meet at least 7 times during the 2018 interim, and to the extent practical, and meet at least once in each of the 7 appointment districts around the state. And then over on to page 29, the committee exists until December 13, 2018. Section 6, Mr. Chairman, is appropriations for the committee. You can see subsection A there is an appropriation for the legislative members, and then subsection B is an appropriation for the governor's appointed members. Over on to page 30, this section 7 starting on line 11, this is a transfer from the School Foundation Program Reserve Account, which is repealed. Any excess left in that account will be transferred to the Common School Spending Policy Reserve Account. Mr. Chairman, then section 8, this is just our effective date. So the majority of the bill is effective July 1. Some sections there, 2113-320 is the transportation freeze. And then section 3, committee calibration of transportation and special education. Those are effective immediately. And then I'll turn this over to Matt now.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, the remainder of the bill is the attachment A to the legislation. This is the components of the funding model. And I'll walk through attachment A and highlight the areas that are amended from current law. On page 31, line 13, this just is the definition of average daily membership, which references current statute. And then we break up the model into 4 categories for purposes of referencing external cost adjustments. So in subsection A, paragraph 2, education materials is made up of the following components, starting on line 19 on page 31 and going over to page 32, line 20 and subparagraph J. The next component is the energy model component on page 33, line 1. And again, these are all unchanged from current law. We had defined FTE, and on line 5 through 7, then paragraph 5 defines the non-professional labor category of the model and provides those components. And then line 15 defines the professional labor category through line 21. And again, these are all unchanged. Going on to page 34, this is just a piece of language that provides that this is the legislative model, notwithstanding the components recommended by the cost of education study from the 2015 recalibration. Lines 7 through 23, and then going on to page 35, line 8. These are the class sizes provided to schools. Again, these are unchanged. Line 10 through 19 provides minimum teacher funding levels. And then line 21 through 23 provides minimum physician levels for small schools. Go on to page 6, page 36, line 2. This is the First Amendment under current law. We provide that the instruction facilitators are funded through the block grant. And we provide that in the 2017-18 school year, there is no change in funding. And then in the 2018-19 school year, this is reduced by half to 0.45 teacher FT for every prototypical elementary, middle, and high school. That same amendment is on subparagraph B on page 12 as well. And Mr. Chairman, just to identify that estimated cost impact is around $11 million for school year 2018-19. Mr. Chairman, on subparagraph C, line 16, this just ensures that these are resourced at the highest grade level. No change, Mr. Chairman, to core tutors on line 19, going on to page 37, line 10. The next component is in paragraph 8, ELL teachers, no change. But the next change that we do have is, again, as Josh alluded to earlier, is bringing the extended day and summer school programs inside the block grant starting on line 16. And again, there's no change in the funding level, but it's just brought within the block grant portion of the allocations to school districts. Going on to page 38, lines 1 through 6 provide substitute teacher allocations. No change to these resources. Page 38 provides for supervisory aides and pupil support. Going on to page 39, no changes in these allocations. On page 39, line 14, and paragraph 8, guidance counselors, no change to these resources under current law. And then in paragraph 14, librarians, and going on to page 40, lines 10, no change to those allocations. School computer technicians in paragraph 15, no change. And same thing to principals in paragraph 16, going on to page 41. Line 3, no change. Assistant principals in paragraph 17, no change. And then secretaries on line 22, page 41, going on to page 42, no changes in that as well. Clerical positions in paragraph 19, line 18, no change. Going on to page 42. And then page 43, central office staff, no change in the allocation of how many classified staff or professional staff are provided in the central office. Page 44, we get into the first change in the non-personnel section. Central office non-personnel has been modified to $365.86 dollars per student, and that's a change from $355.85 per ADM. So it's actually an increase. In instructional materials, this is a decrease from elementary and middle schools of $338.26 to $191.37 per ADM. And then high schools are reduced from $414 per student to this $191.37. Technology and equipment, again, this is a slight change. Currently, the funding amount is $296.12, and this moves it down to $250. On line 14, gifted and talented, this is an increase to $40.29 per ADM from $29.61 under current law. Vocational education program equipment and supplies increased to $9,428.77, and that currently is being funded at $9,157. Student activities, this component starting in paragraph 26, going on to page 45, line 13, basically adopts the consultant recommendation as well to provide slightly different funding at the grade band level rather than the grade level. Currently, it provides resources at the elementary schools or K through 5 at a per ADM amount, and this provides it at an elementary school. And same thing with middle and high school, it'll be provided at a slightly lower level, and it'll be on a grade band basis. If you look in subparagraph 4, ninth graders, if they were in a middle school or junior high school, will be resourced at the high school that the students normally would attend. For professional development, this changes to 5 days of pupil-free days. Currently, law has this as 10 pupil-free days. And then in some paragraph B, this is increased to $125.90 from the current law of $118.45. Going on to page 46, assessment is reduced to $25 per ADM. Currently, this is provided at $37.37 per ADM. And these, Mr. Chairman, are not the statewide summative assessments, but the formative or interim assessments that school districts provide at their own discretion. Mr. Chairman, the special education and transportation just referenced the statute that have been modified in this bill draft on lines 5 and 8. No change to the food services assumption of that these to be self-supporting programs. No change, Mr. Chairman, to the maintenance and operations personnel funding in paragraph 32, going on to page 47. Mr. Chairman, the last two non-personnel modifications to the bill draft and attachment A is on line 14 of page 47. The maintenance and operations supplies was increased from 67 cents to 68 cents per gross square feet. And then utilities will then be reduced slightly to account for external cost adjustments applied to the consultant level funding recommendations. Okay, Mr. Chairman, on page 48, line 4 starts the salaries recommendations. And this is a slight modification than what we currently provide in the current attachment A. The current attachment A has average salaries provided, and so these we, to provide less confusion or maybe more confusion, have used a base salary amount. So these salary allocations are 0 years of experience and 0 education credits or 0 responsibility level. So currently, we in our funding model provide for the average, and students or salaries are then adjusted from that average. And going from the base amount, these would then be aggregated based upon each district's education experience and responsibility level. So just a mathematical calculation works the same, and the amounts are the same. It's just a different approach to make it a little bit more clear on how much each district's education experience adjustments are worth. Mr. Chairman, the table is then also duplicated starting on page 20 for school year 2018-19. And then going on to page 49, the 2 adjustments that we did with regards to the salaries is in school year 2017. We reduced the 5 days of professional development at the teacher salaries. And then in 2018-19, the superintendent, assistant superintendent, and business managers on lines 2, 3, and 4 of page 49 were reduced by 10%. Mr. Chairman, on page 49, line 13 through 16, again, as I mentioned earlier, these salary amounts are then further adjusted in accordance with 2113-309, subsection M, paragraph 5, to account for each district's education experience and responsibility level. And then they are further adjusted by each school district's regional cost adjustment. So, for example, in Teton County School District, they're adjusted by approximately 38%. Mr. Chairman, the last kind of double asterisk that we have put in here is on line 18, just to signify which positions in the model are receiving the teacher's salary. Okay, Mr. Chairman, on page 50, line 1 are the benefits provided for each position, which includes workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, and retirement. No change to current law. And then also we provide for Medicare, Social Security, and health insurance. Mr. Chairman, on page 51, line 1, as I mentioned earlier, salaries are further adjusted by the regional cost adjustment. And this is just the enactment of that provision. And then the last paragraph, 38 here, provides for the recommended cost indices for each of your model categories. And Mr. Chairman, that goes on to page 52, where we do school adjustments. Again, these are no changes to current law. These just spell out some different formula calculations for small schools or different configurations of schools, going on to page 53. And that, Mr. Chairman, is the bill.
Thank you, Josh and Matt. Does anybody from the committee have any questions?
Mr. Chairman,
Go ahead.
either Josh or Matt, just to make sure that I'm understanding correctly, and maybe just for clarification of everybody in the audience as well, if we go back to page 48 and 49 with the base salaries and average salaries, and then if we continue on to page 50, there's really no difference compared to what we currently see from the 2011 attachment A. Is that correct?
Matt?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Brown, this again is just a different approach on how we just display these within the attachment. There's no change under current law for all the positions except for the teacher salaries. We have eliminated the 5 days of professional development starting in the school year 2017-18, and then the 10% reduction to the district administrative salaries on page 49, lines 2, 3, and 4. So there's no change to the rest of the salary levels, just a different approach on how we lay this out in the attachment.
Further questions?
Thank you.
Further questions from the committee? All right. At this time, we will start the public comment period. And like I said, we're going to spend about 45 minutes on actually looking at the cuts and hearing what you all have to say about the budget cuts. And so we'd like to start that. There's a mic over here on my left. There's a mic on my right. And if you would line up, if anybody would like to make a comment, we're willing to start that process. We have an old veteran coming up here. He'll be able to start this. Make sure you pronounce your name, where you are, who
Thank
you
you,
work
Mr.
for.
Chairman. My name is Kurt Schmidt. I'm the Assistant Superintendent from Fremont County School District 21. And I started working in school finance in Wyoming in 1982, so I've pretty much seen all the changes that have happened over the course of the history in Wyoming. One of the first things I did provide, Josh, hopefully you got the one-page sheet that I provided. I apologize, Mr. Chairman, it's not a book like you usually get, but hopefully it's concise and to the point. One of the things that I'm concerned about in this legislative session is taking a model that's been developed over the last 10 years and changing it during a general session. It's a very, as you know, as many of you know, it's a very complicated system, and there's a lot of thought that goes into it. So to try and make changes on the fly right now, I think is kind of dangerous to the system. The thoughts that I gave you, as far as reductions, if you look at the first sheet, it talks about instructional facilitators and the Bridges grant. Those were put outside the model intentionally when it was done originally and have been outside the model. So if you reduce that funding right now, you're not going to affect the model. The one change that I think would help in terms of your goals in cutting expenditures is the classroom changes that are outlined in House Bill 138. If you implement those changes by themselves, as you can see, it generates over $33 million more than what's proposed in House Bill 236 right now. It keeps it simple. It gives the legislature time to study over the next year to look at the funding model. It keeps the funding model fairly intact. The classroom changes do change the model, but they're pretty simple. That's it, Mr. Chairman, evidently.
Questions for Kurt? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Colby Gull. I'm the superintendent of the schools over in Lyman. I want to echo what Kurt said about changing things in the model on the fly. I think that's an important thing for the committee to think about. Another thing to think about that I haven't seen in some of the bills that have come across so far is that the funding model for schools already has built into it reductions for school districts. The last number I heard was that the enrollment in Wyoming is down 1%. As there's less kids in school, then we automatically have less funding going to schools. And so I think that's something that we need to take into consideration as we look at changing that funding there. Another thing to think about, so I'm also representing the Small Schools Coalition. Another thing to think about is the disproportionality of the effect that one student has in schools. One student in Kemmerer, Sheridan 3, or in Carbon 2 has a bigger impact on the school district and the way things work than one student does in Casper or in the city of Sheridan. And so I think that's something to take into consideration as you look at reducing funding models as well. So I'm varying a little bit from the remarks that I have up there. I also sent you guys a letter the other day. I think one of the things to keep in mind in addition is that as we look at trying to reduce funding for schools, if we allow local school boards to make those decisions on the best way to change those things in their local school district, rather than to make those decisions at a legislative level, if we can make those at a local level, I think that makes a bigger impact on the kids and makes things work for local communities. I think it's important for the legislature to be able to provide flexibility for local school districts. I think some of the things that you guys look at that can do that are with instructional facilitators, the 16-to-1 ratio. I think there's some flexibility that can be built in there without the legislature dictating how that funding works. I'd rather see the local school districts and the legislature work together collaboratively rather than to have the changes to funding come as a you're doing to us, rather than we're doing this together. So with that, I'll stand for any questions that you guys might have.
Questions for Colby? Go ahead, Representative Freeman.
Thank you. So you would prefer across the board percentage change of the formula to us picking and choosing?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Freeman, yes, I think that it makes it easier for local school districts to make those decisions rather than to have the legislature make those decisions for us. And then if we need to reopen the recalibration and look at the whole funding model, I think it would be better to do that when there's time to actually go through and look at the model where everybody gets some input to how that goes. I think that's one of the things that's gone really well for Wyoming is that when we look at the funding model, it's not a one group of people looking at it individually, but it's done collectively with lots of different voices putting some input into that. And I think that's really helped the system work. It seems like if we make changes now, that's a unilateral legislative decision rather than a whole group decision.
Further questions for Colby? Thank you, Colby.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Bill Winnie, Sublette County. I don't envy you gentlemen and ladies. You have to have the wisdom of Solomon in figuring out how to divide the baby. But you've already heard some remarks on instructional facilitators, and I'd like to juxtapose a couple things. There's another piece of legislation floating around that would raise the reading goal and at the same time cut funding for instructional facilitators. You know, there's a tendency to say instructional facilitators just teach teachers. And that can easily become a thought about, well, maybe we don't really need them. But frankly, good instructional facilitators make a difference if the school system, school districts use them properly. I'm aware of one reading and literacy instructional facilitator was brought in a school district. Their ACT scores were going down, and this instructional facilitator was brought in with the idea that it would improve those scores, and they did. Across 3 years, they went up 8%. It's not too bad. At the same time, we took a look at the MAP reading assessment. I think it's MAP. Maybe I didn't get the letters right in there. But anyway, the reading assessment and a state assessment, and you have to do a cohort by cohort analysis. And those scores went up 5%, a little bit more than 5% across the same time frame. So if a goal is set to raise reading scores, and of course that other legislation may or may not come to pass, I got it, but you get my point. You got to give the districts the tools to do it. And IFs can be a common thing here, and in this case, reading. And my comment for you is don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. Mr. Chairman, subject to your questions, thank you.
Questions for Mr. Winnie? Thank you, Bill.
Mr. Chairman, Ed Getz, Business Manager, Albany County School District. 1 year ago, the recalibration report dated January of 2016 was sent by the Select Committee to update the school funding model, and many legislators on this committee were involved in that work. The comprehensive report totaling 451 pages was the result of a year's worth of work to accomplish the 5-year recalibration as required by statute and the Supreme Court. As stated in the report, the evidence-based recommendations are no more likely to reflect the method of delivery of educational services in Wyoming schools than those services delivered with the resources provided by the current statutory model. There is a substantial benefit to continuing to fund schools via the statutory model by providing consistency in the funding for school districts. The report found that the cost of education studies conducted by Picus and Auden and Associates and the allocation of resources in total would provide sufficient funds to each school district to adequately provide the basket of goods required to meet the state's duty under the Wyoming Constitution to provide education to Wyoming students. For those of you who are newer to this, Picus and Auden and Associates were selected over 10 years ago to provide a more transparent model than what was in place at that time in the MAP model. And there was also a substantial amount of input taken in that process. One of the key principles of this report and the systems developed by the Select Committee and the legislature over the past 20 years has been providing consistent funding for school districts. Recalibrating the model so soon after the most recent 5-year recalibration is setting a new precedent that could be a slippery slope, leading to continually revisiting the funding system and finding new consultants to get new answers whenever the revenue picture or the legislature changes. This could easily erode the funding for school districts and the education of students in Wyoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Ed. Let's go over here to my right.
Thank you, Chairman Northrup. Good to see you. Committee, thank you. My name is Kirby Eisenhower, and I'm an Associate Superintendent at Campbell County School District. I'm also a proud father of a 4th and 2nd grader that benefit from our current system. I want to begin by saying that I'm not opposed, or our district's not opposed to the entire bill, and appreciate your looking into, or your attention to looking at new revenue sources. A lot of excellent and important work is occurring for the future of Wyoming. And I'm not talking about the work across the street, I'm talking about what happens in our classrooms every day. That's where the future lies. So one of those students today is going to sit in your seat one of these days, so I believe we need to invest in our future. On Friday, I had the fortune to listen to Secretary Bebow refer to the progress that's being made in our state's education system as garbage, or the data that supports that. And I can assure you the work that we're doing is not garbage, and I believe our parents and students would agree with us. On Friday, I was also able to listen to Speaker Harshman introduce House Bill 191. It's a very good bill, and it allows the state to cherry pick some of the best and brightest students outside of our borders and attract them into our state through Hathaway. And I watched this committee approve that unanimously, with the idea that those students would come into the state and then plant roots and contribute to our state. This bill does just the opposite. With these cuts, we'll experience teacher reductions, and ultimately, we'll be sending some of our teachers across the state line to educate non-Wyoming students. So I close just saying this is too big, it's too fragile, it's too complicated, and it's too important to rush through this and throw something together through the session. I encourage you to support House Bill 225, Representative Harshman's bill, to work this through the super committee. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirby. Questions for Kirby? Go ahead, Representative Freeman.
This is a question that I'm going to be kind of redundant on. Would you rather see us go through the model and cut certain places of the model, or would you rather have a percentage reduction on the foundation grant?
Mr. Chairman, Representative Freeman, that wasn't on purpose. Again, I'll refer to, I would like to see us be patient. It's not 4th and 10 yet. Work through this subcommittee, but if that was our choice, the percent increase or the percent decrease, I think would be the fairest way to do it.
Thank you. Further questions for Kirby? Thank you, Kirby. Kathy?
Kathy Vetter, President of the Wyoming Education Association. Chairman Northrup, and committee members. First, I want to thank you for all of the work that you put into this bill, the time you've taken to do the white paper and look at all the aspects of education, not just cuts. One thing I do agree is that we must keep the integrity of our funding model. It has been built over years of hard work to develop a funding model that we know is equitable across the state of Wyoming. One of the things that you're looking at freezing funding on at the current levels is special education. One thing I would hope that you would consider if you do that is that our small schools, it would take one high-needs student to move into a small school that would wipe out that small school. So there needs to be an exception for high-need students that move into our school districts, because we must provide the services to those students, and our small school districts and even our large school districts can't find the funds to do that without the help of the legislature. So I'll stand for questions.
Thank you, Kathy. And that is the intention, that when you have that one student who moves into a school district and has high needs, and you end up with a high tuition going into a BOCES or wherever that student's placed, that there would be a fund to be able to pick that up so it wouldn't disrupt the special education in the district.
Not all students would be sent out of districts. Some may be kept in districts, such as a visually impaired student that needs a lot of equipment. So that needs to be taken into consideration also, please.
Great input. Thank you.
Thank
Questions
you.
for Kathy? Thank you.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Carol Jellicoe, 32-year veteran teacher in Sweetwater County School District Number 1, and now the fortunate privilege, I guess, of being a trustee on the Sweetwater School District Number 1 Board of Trustees. We have gone through cost-saving task force, insurance, options committees, public forums. We have been searching for ways to cut costs just for the $3.7 million reduction in funds that we are receiving from last year's legislation. So we are down to the point, having gone through all these opportunities, to looking at cutting teachers, cutting programs. The bottom line is we have a significant number of young, very energetic, enthusiastic teachers that if we turn away with the national shortage of teachers that's coming forth, we're never going to get them back. And so I think we need to look down the road at the consequences of the kinds of things that are happening within our schools if we have to end up cutting positions. I'll stand for questions.
Questions? Thank you very much. Over here.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and representatives. My name is Alan Demray. I'm the Director of Special Services for Sweetwater 2 in Green River. I'm also a member of the Executive Committee for the Wyoming Association for Special Education Administrators. As you continue to tackle the difficult challenge of addressing funding cuts to public education in Wyoming, I want to focus on the concerns and unintended consequences of making changes to the manner in which special education is currently being funded. Public education means that anyone who walks through our front doors of our schools are entitled to a tuition-free education, funded and operated by the government. Public education also means that the local school district must appropriately educate, as determined by IDEA and at no cost to the parents, any child with a disability who is eligible for special education. In meeting our federal and moral obligation of providing students with disabilities with a free and appropriate public education, we can rarely predict which students will enter through those front doors. This means that while this year, in preparing for next year's budget, we can make any of those changes, but we may not have a student that is deaf. However, we can't predict if that student will walk into our building at any time the following school year. Therefore, public school also means that a district cannot deny a family enrollment to their school solely because that family has students with needs. Federal requirements under IDEA prohibits districts from making educational decisions solely based on the costs associated with costs. Special education expenditures are unpredictable, and this is why placing a freeze on reimbursement is problematic. We're federally required to enroll all students and must ensure that they are providing them with a free and appropriate public education. Yet it must also be noted that due to the remoteness and rural status of our state, one that most Wyomingites, including myself, enjoy, districts are not able to contract with any community resources as districts in larger metropolitan areas are. Therefore, it's the school district's obligation to comply with IDEA and appropriately service those students. We must hire specialized staff that can provide those services, hence increasing expenditures. To additionally highlight the unpredictability of special education needs, we can examine our enrollment patterns in Sweetwater 2, where we had 441 students that lasted all year with us. We had 530 students throughout the entire school year. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan. Questions for Alan? Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow legislators. My name's Kelly McGovern, and I'm the superintendent in Sweetwater Number 1 in Rock Springs. I'd like to talk to you briefly this evening about the operating days, going from 185 down to 180, also student needs and accountability. When we reduce the days from 185 to 180, we're reducing salaries. We reduce twofold, salaries for our teachers and our administrators. And in addition to that, we reduce the amount of time for professional development. I know that on behalf of our district, I submitted a paper on the effects of what this omnibus bill would do. But I strongly encourage this group to really think about the effects of that. When people come to our great state, they come here because of our salaries, because of what we can offer from surrounding states. And when they're here, we're able to keep these people here because of the relationships and the people that we bring in. We have some of our best teachers. But when we lose that benefit to draw people here to Wyoming, not only do we never get that back, but then we lose the expertise of our veteran staff once they retire. So I strongly encourage this group to take a look at that. It would be better in order to, we can all see the magnitude of what the education deficit is. And I encourage this group to go slowly. Any decisions that are made in haste are most likely going to be negative decisions. In the funding model, we also know that we don't have counselors and nurses for support. And as many of the other people have testified, we know that the needs of the kids that are coming in addition to special education, but the needs of our kids are more severe than what we've seen in the past. So any decision that we make is going to affect our students. And I encourage all of us to keep our students first and remember our faculty and our staff that we want to keep here in our schools. And I'll be happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Representative Freeman.
My continuing question, we're forced to make cuts to fill a funding vacancy. Would you rather the legislature look at specific items to cut, or would you rather have a percentage cut for the whole formula?
Mr. Chairman and Representative Freeman, I would say neither. I think any decision that we make right now, our deficit is so big for the magnitude. I can sympathize with what you're feeling, but I also have it back at home trying to balance a budget. I have been through periods where I have had to RIF 75 paraprofessionals and move 21 paraprofessionals into other jobs just to be able to offer positions. What that is like to look those people in the face and affect their employment, the groceries that they buy, the gas in their cars. And we had to do that in order to protect teachers in the classrooms. And any decision to have to do that to any of our administrators or our teaching staff would be so severe that I don't know if we could ever recover to the ability that we need to. So for those reasons alone, I would say neither. I would allow the time to honestly take a look at some of the actions that we do, get input from other people, and then be able to make a decision that we could all live with. But anything in haste, I don't think we would make the best decision.
Thank you. Further questions? Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, representatives, my name is Daniel Mayer, and I am the Region 5 Executive Director, BOCES Director, and I'm the current president for the Wyoming Administrators for Special Ed Administrators. And so I'm going to continue on with my good friend's thoughts. I would like to address some additional areas that are in need of being addressed when discussing the proposed bill, and I'm going to speak to some of the calibration freeze of special ed funds. While this may be discussed through an interim committee, I would like to remind you all of the rules and guidelines as it pertains to our obligation to comply with the maintenance of effort requirement through the Office of Special Ed Programs and potential consequences of failing to do so. The idea imposes a maintenance of effort obligation on local school districts. The local maintenance of effort provision states that any particular fiscal year, each district must spend the same amount of state and local funds on special ed as it did in the previous year, either on an aggregate or per capita basis. And I think as we go into a committee study of this, this needs to be in the forefront of our minds, or any freeze of this obligation that we have to spend this maintenance of effort. I'll give you an example. South Carolina underwent a similar reduction in special ed funding a few years ago and ended up in hearing in a lawsuit with OSEP over not meeting the maintenance of fiscal support requirement. Office of Special Ed Programs, OSEP, was unforgiving, was only satisfied when the legislature reworked the funding structure in lieu of paying back millions of dollars in funds to the U.S. Department of Education instead of being reduced their 6B funds. The impact of these actions will be felt through both state funds and reduction of our federal funds. This is not just at the state level. Districts have the same requirement of maintenance of effort and would also have to send back funds to the United States Department of Education, equivalent of the reduction of the maintenance of effort or the amount of the IDEA Part B grant, or the lesser of the two. No state has ever been granted a full waiver of maintenance of effort. Louisiana was given a bye because they were affected by Katrina. It's also important to note the data that has been made available to the Joint Education Committee by the Wyoming Association of Special Ed Administrators, which portrays the positive outcomes that have been accomplished with our students with disabilities as a result of appropriate funding. Among many that we are proud of, including graduating 60% of students with disabilities. Remember, districts are penalized for students receiving a certificate of attendance, or under current graduate formula, 70% of students receiving a certificate. 80% of parents are pleased with our services, and we have very low due process or litigation in our state, so I think that speaks that parents are pleased with our services.
Questions for Daniel? Thank you, Daniel. Go ahead.
Good evening, Mr. Chairman and fellow representatives. My name is Nicole Bolton, and I'm the Human Resources Director and Assistant Superintendent at Sweetwater County School District Number 1. I am here on behalf of our school district, and I would like to speak quickly to the special education proposal. Many things of what I was going to say has already been said, so I'm not going to repeat that. However, if you cap it at 1 year, the needs in special education change year to year so drastically. And we have seen over the course of the years an increase in influx of high-need students. High-need students that don't need to be sent away. We can absolutely meet their needs in our public school system where they can stay home with their families. But by providing assistive technology, the paraprofessionals, the proper teachers, in the course of the last 5 years, we've went from one school that housed all three alternative programs to now 3 of our elementary schools housing all 3 programs. Our numbers have increased that much. I also worry about the litigation if we're not able. I worry about litigation increasing if we are unable to provide the level of services that we have been. I would just like to reiterate about the funding, and we're already in a deficit of $3.7 million from the negative cost adjustment. And with that, we're down enrollment, 145 students. And so any adjustment to the cost model is going to add to that, and it's going to affect jobs. We're going to lose people. We're going to lose our student population, and we're not going to be able to offer the quality education that Wyoming is known for and always been able to offer.
Thank you, Nicole. Questions?
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
Keep trying to grab these special ed people. I don't mean to put you on the spot. I don't know that you'll know this answer. But when you talk about the high-needs students, do you have any idea what the cost of a high-needs student is for a year?
You know what, to ramble that number off the top of my head, I don't want to give you inaccurate information, and it depends child to child and how severe the needs are, how many adults we need to put with them, what kind of technology they need. Oftentimes, some of them need nurses. Any of our schools that house special programs each have a teacher. They each have a minimum of 2 paraprofessionals. We have to have a social worker on site. We have to have a nurse. We also have to have a counselor. It increases the services. So right there, that's not including the technology, the different curriculum and adaptions, special transportation.
Thank you.
Further questions for Nicole? Thank you, Nicole.
Thank you.
Donna, you're up. So to say.
I need a booster stool. Good evening, Chairman Northrup, Education Committee members. My name is Donna Little-Como. I am the superintendent of Sweetwater 2 in Green River. I have some concerns about the bill I wanted to share with you. Number one, with all the bills that I've been seeing coming out, I haven't seen an acknowledgement of the enrollment decreases across our state. In Sweetwater 2, we have had a decline of 2% of enrollment. We have lost 45 kids just since Christmas. I'm concerned about, we know we have to adjust for that, but to adjust for that on top of some other cuts that are coming. I'm very concerned about the decrease in instructional materials. Our governor just signed a bill, or the approval of new science standards for our state. They're very different than our current science standards, which means we need to adjust our materials in order to provide a high-quality education for our students. I'm very, very concerned about special education. Our children are important. And the test results that came out talked about how Wyoming ranks #1 in closing the gap with our most needy kids. I shared a picture with you. These are my boys. They turned 5 years old on December 27th. They're going into kindergarten next year. Stephen is on track. James, the little blondie, has an IEP. He may look normal and beautiful, and I think he is, but he has a lot of services. OT, PT, speech and language. He needs cognitive support. He needs technology support. There's a brilliance inside of this child. I know he's going to be something for tomorrow, but we have to be very careful when we start cutting funds and remember that these are faces of real people with real names. Thank you.
Thank you, Donna. Questions or comments for Donna? Thank you, Donna.
Thank you.
Go ahead, sir.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, representatives, my name is Scott Duncan. I'm the business manager for Sweetwater 1, and I would like to talk specifically about the transportation piece of this proposed legislation. Chapter 20 Transportation Rules and Regulations require busing for students living outside a designated radius. Limiting the amount of reimbursements without regulation adjustments is another unfunded mandate placed upon the districts. If a cap on reimbursements is implemented, students may be required to walk further to school or spend an undue amount of time riding to and from school on the bus. Bus routes would be fewer in total and longer in length. As far as general inflation is not being accounted for when you cap expenditures at a certain level, so things like fuel prices, an increase in student enrollments, as well as any additional bus routes wouldn't be accounted for going forward. And as far as the bus replacements, there's no clear guidance in this proposed legislation for what constitutes an emergency. And with the thought of replacing a bus, it takes, on the average 3 months or so to get a new bus. It would be hard to address those emergencies given the time it takes to get a new bus in place. And I stand for questions.
Thank you, Scott. Questions or comments for Scott? Thank you. Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Matt Williams. I'm the Special Education Director of Uintah County School District Number 1 in Evanston. I've been in education for approximately 13 years. I've been a classroom teacher for the vast majority of that, just becoming the director in the last few months. First of all, to speak to supporting students with special needs through the 100% reimbursement model. Coming from a state, I would actually say being rescued from a neighboring state where funding is at a minimal for education, not to mention special education, Wyoming was a godsend. It saved me and my family from poverty. I feel now I'm in an organization and in a district that values education and values the service that we are able to give to our students and our parents of those students. I've been, like I said, in the classroom. I've taught various resource room math classes, and writing classes, and reading classes. I've helped students in the bathroom. I've stood shoulder to shoulder with the most amazing paraprofessionals in the state, maybe more shoulder to elbow. They're on the tall side of things. These are phenomenal individuals that I trust my children with, my 8th grader and my 5th grader, at any point during the day. I fear that if we go through with these cuts, that we turn a sacred IEP process that protects these students under IDEA to a budget question. And through this, the decisions that need to be made, that should be made, that must be made, will be put on the back burner because of these various circumstances. I value Wyoming. Like I said, as an educator, it saved my professional career so that I didn't choose another path. I appreciate the support you've given to me, my family, and our school district over the last decade. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. Questions, comments? Thank you. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Dan Celeroli, Sweetwater 1. I'm the Director of Facilities. One of the things that I was looking at when I got down here, honestly, I didn't know what I was going to talk about. But then when I saw that we're getting a 1 cent raise in our maintenance, that's all fine and dandy except for the ADM. You're changing the definition of ADM, or how it's calculated. That will directly affect not just my maintenance money that I get from the block grant, but also will that affect my major maintenance money. I serve on the SFD's committee for the reviewing of major maintenance so that we can be in compliance with the I think it's House Bill 158 or 58. And I don't understand. The governor came out 2 years ago and said that we were to preserve our assets, and you're cutting the funds or the way that we calculate. So it looks like we're getting more money, but the calculation is not going to come out that we're getting more money. So how are we going to preserve the assets? Billions of dollars. I mean, this state has spent billions of dollars on assets. How in the world are we going to preserve those assets if you don't give us more money or give us the same amount of money to improve or keep up these buildings? Remember, we can't do preventive maintenance with major maintenance money. It has to come out of our block grant money. If we can't maintain those buildings, you're going to have to give more money to the major maintenance side. And I know this in the large scheme of things, you know, with people being laid off, possible layoffs if we have these cuts, this is maybe a minor issue. But 5 years from now, if you folks are still here, it's going to be a huge issue when we don't have the money to take care of these buildings that we put so much money into and take so much pride. We put the most important thing in the world in those buildings, that's our students. And are we really going to let them run down? Thank you.
Thank you, Dan. Any questions? Thank you. Go ahead.
Good evening, Chairman Northrup and members of the committee. Thank you so much for the opportunity to have us all come and speak with you today. We are all in this together. We should be working as a team to solve these problems, and so I appreciate the opportunity for you to hear what we have to say. I come from Star Valley. I come from Lincoln County School District number 2, and I don't have a name tag. I am grateful to be in that district. I was in Phoenix for 15 years, and the education got so horrible that both my husband and I, who are educators, could no longer survive, as the previous gentleman said in front of me. We came to Wyoming, and we're so grateful for an amazing school district with high student achievement, amazing people, where men can actually be in the profession and support their families, where single women are able to afford to take care of their families, and to destroy that by taking cuts that affect us all differently. I think to address Representative Freeman's question, we would very much like the opportunity to be given a cut and make those decisions on a local basis. We've been working for the past year to look at efficiencies. We were directed last year that transportation should be cut, and so we made, not only did we look at our transportation and start budgeting lower this year to all of our schools, but we've looked at every aspect. We've involved maintenance, teachers, cooks, paraprofessionals, everyone we can. We've come in multiple committees throughout this entire year to provide us an opportunity to make our own efficiency adjustments. We would very much like to be supported to continue those efforts and make local decisions about those cuts. We appreciate that you're investigating and looking at all areas, but we feel we're the best ones to make those decisions to hold our high student achievement. And then finally, to comment on instructional facilitators and echo many sentiments that have been given to you today. If you look at the research and you look at where school districts are using them appropriately, they do impact student achievement. They do help teachers become better. Even professional athletes have coaches. One of my representatives told me that there was a concern that maybe the college wasn't doing its job if we needed teachers to have coaches. That's not true. It's to help support them and provide them with what they need to continue to be excellent in the classroom. So I really feel that our instructional facilitators should stay outside the model. But if they are put in the model, allow us, please, the opportunity to make efficiency cuts as a local district. I'll take any questions.
Thank you. Could you state your name, please?
Amanda McAdams.
Thank you, Amanda. Questions for Amanda? Thank you. Over here.
Hi. My name is Justin Sitzman. I teach here in Cheyenne, Wyoming. And as I stand here, it's kind of fun to stand in line. You get to think about a lot of things. And probably one of the most important things that I've noticed as we've talked and as the state legislator has stepped up is you guys are effectively the government, and the main job of any government is to provide for the citizenry, provide basic services. And I would counter that education is a basic service. And many of you have asked, or you guys have asked, where should we cut? How should we cut? And I think it's kind of amazing that we never pretend that there's ways that we could bring money into the state. We're one of the few states in the nation that doesn't have an income tax. Nobody's a big fan of taxes. Nobody jumps up and goes, yes, tax day. But let's not pretend that that doesn't exist. We also can't pretend that oil and coal are going to save us as a state. We can't pretend that oil will be here forever. We can't pretend that coal will magically make a rebound. It doesn't matter who's in the White House. It doesn't matter what happens. Governor Meade has doubled down recently, but we know that oil and coal, they're not a thriving industry. We have other options. And I guess the other piece that I would bring forward is there hasn't been a whole lot of mention of House Bill 233. And I know that that's not the purview of what we're talking about here, but to be honest, that's a scary bill because you always get what you pay for. And to cut educators, to cut paraprofessionals, janitors, you always pay for those people. You always pay for those services, whether it's through welfare or by providing jobs. So I guess that's my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Justin. Any comments? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you.
Chairman Northrup, members of the committee, first of all, I would like to thank you for your service. I think I understand and appreciate the challenge that you face, particularly this year. But I would like to say a couple things about the current model. I'm a career educator, now retired, serving on the 9th year of the Board of Trustees here in Laramie County School District number 1. Some years ago, we moved from half-day to full-day kindergarten. A couple years after we started, I had a legislator, not one that's present here, ask me if we'd seen any effect on our graduation rate. I said, well, that's a little bit of a challenge because those kids that first did that are now in 2nd grade. So now my point is one that this model that we have is a wonderful model. We're seeing great results from it, but the results are cumulative. Much of the money we put into was lower class size and those lower grades, and I think we will really see some benefit from that in years to come. So please think about that, the momentum we have, the results we're seeing, and as you make your decision, try not to do anything that would really kill the momentum of our progress. Thank you very much. I'll stand for
Thank you. Could you tell me your name, please?
Oh, Jim Landon, I'm sorry.
Thanks, Jim. Go ahead, Representative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm Mary Throne, and I'm here tonight in my capacity as a parent. I also, from time to time, have served on the Parent Advisory Committee for Laramie County 1. And welcome to Cheyenne East to the committee. Thank you for being here. It makes it easier for me to pick up my son, who's in wrestling practice right now, although it was hard to find a parking place. As a former member of your committee, I just want to quickly give you some context for those of you who are relatively new, and it sort of dovetails with what Mr. Landon just said. To go back a few years, in 2011, then Speaker Buchanan, in his opening remarks, complained about the need for remediation in education and the low graduation rate at 75%. The governor's quote on education that year is, "But we recognize we're spending on a Cadillac plan and not getting Cadillac results." Those speeches and some other items that year caused a flurry of activity, a lot of which started out as punishing public education. And I'm here to say I really think we don't want to go back. We spent the last 6 years increasing rigor in our classrooms, developing an accountability system that is showing results. And I know some of you are familiar with these numbers, but at CSG West in August of 2015, a leading expert there pointed out that Wyoming was leading in the western states and 6th in the world in science. Also, similarly, doing well in math. So following on what Mr. Landon said, we need to take out the punitive discussion, and I'm happy to say that this committee is not headed down that path, and I would ask you to hold firm. But there are a number of pieces of legislation out there that seem to want to blame the education world for the drop in the price of oil. They are not responsible for the drop in the price of oil. They're holding up the stop sign, but I just want to point out this number for the benefit of the audience, and I hope other parents come up to speak. Laramie County spends roughly $14,000 per year per student. I've had 3 kids go through this school system, $42,000 a year. I have not paid $42,000 a year in taxes, and I think we need to, or anywhere close to that, and I'm not suggesting I want to. But in any event, I think it's important that you continue to educate the public broadly on the subject of education, and thank you, and I apologize for going over.
Thank you, Mary. Go ahead, sir.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, first I'd like to thank all of you for this opportunity. My name is Grady Hutcherson. I currently teach 2nd grade in Torrington, Wyoming, and have taught for over 20 years. So this evening we've listened to a lot about what the cuts might mean, but I wanted to share with all of you from my perspective, being in the classroom every single day. My district would look to lose approximately $700,000 with the proposed cuts. I'm in a building that has 5 sections of 2nd grade. We all currently are at 18 students. By and large, we all know that the largest portion of a school district's budget has to do with salaries and benefits. So my fear is if we look at the cuts and if we have to eliminate just 1 2nd grade teacher in my building, I would be, instead of having 18 students, I would have 22 students. So that might not seem like a lot, but if you're in a classroom all day with 22 7- and 8-year-olds instead of 18, I will share with you it does make a difference. And I love my students, do not get me wrong. However, I have grave concerns when we start talking about cuts because of the impact that it will have on students. We also like to make sure that the conversation is always centered on what we can measure, such as the math scores or the reading scores. But I will tell you, every day in my classroom, the other components, the social issues, the emotional issues, for some of my students, those things are much more of a priority than any of the academics. So I wanted to share just 2 minutes worth of input with you all from my perspective of being in a classroom all day, every day. And I certainly would appreciate any of you telling me what questions you have.
Thank you, Grady. Any questions? Go ahead. One side or the other.
Hi. Thank you so much for being here tonight to explain this to us and to allow us the opportunity to come before you and present questions and our thoughts. We're the Tidwell family, and we are so blessed to now call Wyoming home. This is my husband, Chad Tidwell. I'm Heather Tidwell. This is our son, Caleb. And this is our second time in Wyoming. We were fortunate enough to be stationed here from 2011 to 2014, where we are one of, as I think it was Mr. Allen in Sweetwater too said, you never know what kind of child is going to walk through the doors of your school and the needs that they will have. We are very much representing that family. Wyoming, and I know in Cheyenne, you have a large military base here. You never know what kind of students are going to come through your doors. We are parents. We're representing parents of children with special needs right now, but we also happen to have higher education degrees. I have a master's in education. My husband has a doctorate in education administration. So we're coming to you understanding the laws and the needs that are there, but we're also coming to you very concerned as parents. When we were stationed here, our son had an amazing experience, and we've moved 18 times with the military. We've been from Wyoming to Colorado to Vermont to Mississippi to Tennessee, you name it. We've been in many states and many different school districts, and I can tell you right now that Wyoming is the only state that we have been in that has been doing special education correctly. I'm gonna Nationwide, the number of just 6 to 21-year-old students classified with autism, and this is just one of the disabilities, rose 165% between 2005 and 6 and 2014 and 15 school years. That was based on a count of nearly all states. Interestingly enough, Wyoming did not report on this finding, so we have no idea where Wyoming fell in that. But I'm going to tell you right now, our son, when we left here in 2014, we went to Mississippi and Colorado, and our son kept saying, I want to go back to Wyoming and graduate with my friends. And my husband has been commuting from Denver to here for this entire school year for him to have that opportunity. We just bought a house, and we are calling Wyoming home as we're retiring in a few months. And our son, I will just put it like this. Everywhere else, our son has been a special needs student. In the state of Wyoming and in Laramie County School District number 1, our son has been a student that happens to have some special needs. Thank you for your time.
She used about 30 extra seconds of mine, so if you can just restart the clock, I just need about 30 seconds. Thank you, ma'am. I actually just got through doing a dissertation, successfully defending it, on autism in the military, parents raising and educating kids. I get a little emotional about some things, but that's okay. My country, my fellow Americans, our kids. I interviewed lots of parents. And military parents, we're stationed all over the place, Florida, California, Virginia. The parents gave incredible accolades about Wyoming. Not so much some of the other states, okay? But they talked about what a great place this was. And they were so thankful that they were stationed here. So I encourage you, Wyoming's got a great thing. And I know you may have to think out of the box to keep it going, but please know that there are a lot of people that are praying for you, pulling for you, and figure out how we can do this as a team and continue the great success that this state has. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, Chairman Northrup and members of the committee. I'd also like to thank you for this opportunity. But before I speak, because it always seems like I follow someone who chokes me up, could we please recognize that family for their service to our country and all military families. And you can take that 30 seconds off my time because I think they deserve it. My name is Doreen McGlade. I'm president of the Natrona County Education Association in Casper. I am a 37-year teacher. 30 of those years about were spent in classrooms. I'm currently released as a teacher leader. And I was laughing at myself as I was listening as you went through the bill and the changes, and I thought, I'm probably one of a dozen or maybe 15 teachers in Natrona County School District who really know what you were talking about, because I've been involved in leadership in this area for so long. I wasn't really planning on getting up and speaking, but I heard a comment earlier today referencing that there aren't enough teachers coming and giving testimony. And I do consider myself primarily a teacher, but I'm also elected by teachers to come and participate in this process. There have been so many great comments from the administrative side of it and from the trustees and superintendents and financial people. I am going to address one very small piece, and that is the interrelationship between our instructional facilitators and professional development. As currently stands, the recommendation is to reduce both of those, essentially. And my concerns as a teacher are, our instructional facilitators not only work with veteran teachers, but they also support teachers who are new to the profession. Now, if our instructional facilitators are cut, we're going to be bumping many young families out of the profession and out of Wyoming. And we're not going to be providing as much support for the new folks who stay or for the veteran teachers who need to keep up with the changing demands of education in Wyoming. So it's a little piece, it's from a little bit different perspective. And the last thing I would like to say is thank you so much. I wish I had the wisdom of Solomon or a magic answer, but I do appreciate your work very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Doreen. Questions? Thank you.
Hi, good evening. My name is Catherine Mead, and I'm the chair of the Teton County Board of Trustees. I have heard all the comments, and I think that they've all been very well thought out. But I would say, you know, we're one of the few school districts in the state that's growing. So this year we had 70 more kids. We anticipate 70 to 100 again next year. So some of the methodology by which funding would be frozen is difficult for schools that are growing. I know we're really in the minority, but I think you have to think very carefully about that. All in all, I am a real believer in public education. I think that it is the best thing that America ever did. And it's the reason our democracy succeeds. When you look at other countries like Iraq, when we said, oh, let's make a democracy out of this country, we forgot one prime element, and that was free public education. It is critical to our citizenry. But there is not one system that cannot be improved. And I believe the funding model can be improved. But that's a long discussion. That's a discussion for recalibration or another committee. It's not a discussion for now. If you must cut schools, do it by letting local control operate as it should. We are best able to figure out where we're going to cut, whether it's going to be teachers, activities, busing. Let us do that work. That's what makes all school districts wonderful, is the uniqueness of them. So local control is the way to do it. And I thank you very much for your time. I would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Questions? Thank you, Carol.
Thank you
Kathy?
very much.
Good evening, Chairman Northrop and committee members. My name is Dawn Scarrence. I am the Special Education Director at Wyoming Indian Schools and the immediate past president of the Wyoming Association of Special Education Administrators. I want to urge you to listen to all the testimony that has been given by my fellow colleagues, but especially the family. What a great segue. I wish I was like right behind them, because what I had on my notes was the few things that haven't come up yet is that actually I'm very proud of the services that we have been able to provide our students with the current model with the 100% reimbursement. As a professional group, special education administrators have been very responsible with their funding and their spending. This has been shown even by the most recent PICUS audit agreed that the best, just last year, or just recently, to maintain that kind of reimbursement. So I would say that we have been to now responsible with that, and you heard testimony from families that saying they're, just like we said, over 80% of our families are proud of the work that their children are doing in our schools. So just to wrap it up really quickly, I would just like to remind you that IDA is an entitlement federal law. And so we are required to provide the most appropriate services, free, appropriate public education in the least restrictive environment. Just as people have testified here, that we need to keep our students home and with their families. And that those two things are our prime directives, to make sure that we provide a quality education in the least restrictive environment. So I don't want Wyoming to go down the path of these other states, where we're either not providing adequate education or we're getting ourselves into spending money on lawsuits rather than to the students. That's my biggest concern.
Thank you.
Thank you for your
Questions?
time.
Senator, would you like to go next?
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Floyd Escobel, former legislator, and I'm also on the board of Magic City Enterprises. I've been on the board for about 12, 14 years. Magic City Enterprises, for those of you that might not be aware, services adults with various types of disabilities, various types of medical issues, things of that nature. Do some employment services and socialization, things of those type of services. We service about approximately 100 individuals. Where do these individuals come from? Well, they come from the schools. And speaking of the schools, we also have an organization, Stride Learning Center, which works with approximately 700 children with various types of issues, whether it's hearing, speech, what have you. And recently, Stride had to cut approximately 15 staff members. Well, the less these individuals are prepared for the school is going to make it that much harder for the school. And if the school is having some difficulties because of financial problems, there's going to be more, some of those individuals are going to end up in programs such as Magic City Enterprises. So I think I bring those things up for your consideration when you talk about funding, because it's also interrelated. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Questions for Floyd? Thank you, sir. Go ahead.
Committee member, Chair. My name is Roseanne Rennie. I'm a parent. First of all, I also represent the Parent Advisory Committee for Laramie County School District Number 1. We are a group of parents from each elementary, secondary, and school here at Laramie County School District Number 1. When I was growing up, I'm a native of Wyoming, and I grew up listening to the conversation of how do we keep our kids here. How do we get them to raise their families here? And I'm not exactly spring chicken. So that still is happening here. We still have that communication out there. How do we get families to stay here? Well, in my opinion, it's our standard of education that we offer our Wyoming children and families, because it truly is the gem of our state. I couldn't tell you the number of times that I worked with parents of special needs kids, gifted and talented children, gen ed, doesn't matter. When they come in and talk to me coming from another state, they tell me how amazing it is that Wyoming offers the level of education that we do, and that we don't have a state taxes that's making us, we don't have a state income tax to help support that. So that's always the added afterwards. I would like you to know my genuine concern is that the one-size-fits-all approach going up from Wheatland to Cheyenne, I can't see where the needs of Laramie County School District Number 1 that's still growing, so I echo Teton County as well. They're very special and very different to our smaller districts or districts that have been hit with the energy crisis, and we really need to look at that. I'd also like to point out that we are currently boasting the highest graduation rate ever, and that according to the NAEP Equality Accounts, quality accounts and other assessments, we are improving every year. So we rated in the 7th in that one study, so kind of an island out in the middle of the United States, and I know that you guys have seen many of that already. So I think as a Wyoming native, I'm incredibly proud of that. I'm incredibly proud and honored to work with our teachers. Thank you.
Thank you. Over here, go ahead.
Chairman North and representatives, I'm Robin Stice. I'm a trustee in Sweetwater number 2. I taught for 34 years as a speech and language pathologist, so my heart goes out to the special ed community and their struggles. I was privileged to have 2 children go through the school system in Sweetwater 2, and they received an excellent education. My son and daughter-in-law both teach in our school district. I ran for the school board because I was so proud and privileged to work in our school district. The education that our students received was beyond anything I could imagine kids to have, especially in the area of special education. As a speech and language pathologist, I would make demands for technology that kids needed to communicate, and those were always met. And those children, many of them, went through school with a voice that they never had before. So I appreciate that opportunity. I know you have a struggle ahead of you. Please consider every one of those children in the school systems before you decide to take away services, to take away education or privileges that they've had up until this point. Thank you.
Thank you, Robin. Go ahead.
Chairman Northrup, my name is Kay McAdams. I'm a 32-year veteran who just recently retired from Laramie County School District number 1. I'm here to ask, what price are our children? I don't think you can put a price on them. I can say I had a son who went through Laramie County School District number 1. It costs $255,000 to raise a child. Of what price are our children? They are priceless when your children die for their country. I really want you to consider how you make your cuts. Andrew wanted to come back to this state because it is such a beautiful, beautiful state. And in the need to come back and serve his country, he left to Afghanistan. The last words he said to me was this. I didn't want him to go there. I didn't want him to even join the Army. But he did come back and say the day before he died on Skype was, you have to have a democracy. And in order to have a democracy, you have to have an education, a really good education. And Wyoming is fabulous with that. So I'm begging you, I have no dog in this fight. No dog in this fight. I'm not even teaching anymore. But our children do, and they matter, and there is no price that you can put on them.
Thank you. Dr. Boyd.
Chairman Northrup, members of the committee, my name is Boyd Brown. I'm the superintendent, Campbell County School District. First thing I'd like to do is thank you for your work. I want to thank the sponsors for all the hard work and thought that they put into this bill. I do want to thank you for the balanced approach that you've taken. A couple of things that I do want to do. First thing, I want to remind you that there are 90,000 of those individual faces out there. Some are your kids, some are your grandkids. But as we make these, we need to make sure that we keep those people that are closest to our hearts in mind while we make the cuts and we make the opportunity to have some revenues. The first thing I want to talk about is all of the revenue sources in the bill are temporary, so I believe that all of the cuts should be temporary of some sort as well. I'm going to try not to repeat anything, but I would like to say that I do believe that the fractional ADM is probably something that has been a long time coming, and we probably should standardize that across all districts and put in the fractionalized ADM. I do believe that having attachment A in the bill itself is problematic when you get to committee of the whole. You're going to find people that are going to shoot at their favorite thing to shoot at. So I think that that may have some issues. I am the district that lost over half of the state's ADM this year. I will tell you that there are always hold harmless for other districts whenever there are issues. The regional cost adjustment, any district that is below 100 gets held harmless to 100. There are all kinds of other issues. So I think that rather than giving us a double cut, there should be some sort of hold harmless for us. Chairman Northrup, I appreciate the question today when you asked me about percentage cut or working through the bill for the cuts. I will tell you that I don't believe either one is going to be more constitutional than the other, and I think that it's up to you. I do believe that putting everything into the model and giving each district the most flexibility to deal with those cuts, however they come, is probably the best way to do it. But to tell you whether it should come through the bill or whether it should come as a percentage, I would not be able to tell you that. And I guess I'm out of time, and we'll stop and answer any questions you may have.
Questions for Dr. Brown? Thank you, sir.
Hello, Mr. Chair and representatives. My name is Tiffany Dobler. I currently teach at the University of Wyoming, but I was recently the special education director for the state of Wyoming. So I'm here today to talk a little bit about that maintenance of effort that you're talking about for special education. I want to go on record in saying that, of course, I think you should reimburse always at 100%. However, if it comes to the point where you have to freeze maintenance of effort, I would encourage you to put a scheduled recalibration or a review on that number for every 5 years, every 2 years. I don't know, that would be up to you guys. But as you probably are aware, special education expenses increase from year to year. That's due to medical costs, that's due to salaries, that's due to a number of things. I would encourage you to contact the Wyoming Department of Education. I'm going to give you a name. Jed Cigarelli is an expert in MOE and really truly understands the funding model for special education. He can give you these numbers so you can kind of see what that increase would be. But if you're continuing to reimburse at that same number, my fear is that every year you're going to be giving those districts less and less percentage back. And if you don't have a methodology to go back in and make sure you remind yourselves to recalibrate that, you could be getting down into 30% reimbursement. I mean, we can just continue this. It was when I was at the State Department, that was several years ago, Colorado was reimbursing at 18%. They have high litigation there, and much of that is because they cannot possibly provide the services that we're obligated to provide under IDEA without the funding. And we are so fortunate here. We really have minimal litigation in special education. And I truly believe that's because we have amazing teachers, amazing people, and we have the funding to provide the services that we need to. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Go ahead, Janine.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, do you mind if I shake it up a little bit?
Sure, go ahead.
You've heard a lot about local control. You know how I feel about that. That is indeed the way we should be approaching this. I truly appreciate the work that y'all have been doing. I truly appreciate, particularly on the House side, that this is a balanced approach. However, I will tell you, as I have sat and listened to you all, both chambers, for the last couple of weeks, it saddens me. And what saddens me is we can't get out of the rut. We're in this rut. Boom and bust, boom and bust, boom and bust. When are we going to take it upon ourselves to put a structure in place that allows us to insulate ourselves so that we are not solely dependent on minerals? You can't. Wednesday night, I went home and I thought, holy cow, I sat through a bill. We need to give tax breaks to attract businesses here. That will create jobs. You know what those jobs create? Those jobs bring families with them. So what they're bringing is more expense than the job we're creating. So how can I help you? How can we all get on this page of trying to get a way to put a structure in place so we attract businesses to our community that are going to contribute to our communities? Thank you.
Thank you. We're going to move into the next portion of that, which is comments on revenue enhancement, but I'd like to take a 2-minute break because we've been sitting here a long time and you have too. So stand up and stretch and we'll just have a second and then we'll get after it. Does anybody have any comments on the budget cuts or ways to improve the budget? Revenue side.
So increasing revenue.
Yep.
Mr. Chair, thank you so much and welcome to Cheyenne. All of you. You didn't have to do this. You didn't have to take out your evening and come to meet with us, and it's greatly appreciated, so thank you. My name is Georgia Broyles. I'm a clinical social worker for Laramie County School District number 1. On page 49, it would be nice to see social workers inserted there next to guidance counselors. In our particular district, most of us are social workers that are filling that role. But the reason I'm here now is to talk about revenue, and one idea that I think would really help education is to raise the sin taxes, particularly with alcohol. Wyoming has one of the lowest taxes in the nation. And the tax on beer and malt beverages has not been raised in literally decades. We are so far behind the times in this area. That money could be targeted toward safe and drug-free schools, could be targeted toward drug and alcohol prevention programs, our anti-bullying programs that we have, and I think that could be justified. A few pennies of beer would raise thousands and thousands of dollars for education. And I don't think, even though a lot of people might be crying in their beer, it will not be because it's raised 2 or 3 cents or maybe even a nickel per beer for that money to be used for such a great cause. When in Cheyenne alone, approximately 70% of all arrests that are made in our city are drug or alcohol involved. A lot of people like their beer in Wyoming. Let's take a little bit of that money and let's put it toward a good and positive cause. Thank you.
Thank you, Georgia.
Mr. Chairman and committee members, again, my name is Catherine Mead, and I'm from the Teton County Board of Trustees. In my previous life, I'm a lawyer, and I practiced law as a public lands lawyer. I represented the State Land Department in the state of Arizona for a number of years. So, state lands, we need to sell some. 3.5 acres of surface and 3.5 mineral estates, 86% of that belongs to the school children of this state. We got a piece of property in Teton County that's worth about $70 million that generates about $6,000 a year in an agricultural lease. Come on, we need to really work hard and where we can, sell some of those properties. It doesn't mean that the money is gone. The money goes into the permanent trust fund, but the school districts make the interest on it. Where there are opportunities like that, we need to take them. But I've heard no discussion whatsoever in this legislature or in any other legislature about selling school lands. I think we really need to think about that. It's not all of them. By the way, yeah, 86% of 3.5 million acres, you'd have a real hard time getting rid of all of that. But where there are opportunities, let's take them and have that money available for our school children. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Catherine. Anybody else? Dr. Brown?
Boyd Brown, Campbell County School District Superintendent. Mr. Chairman, members of the board, thank you for the opportunity again. I just want to remind us that we do have some time. We have funding for this biennium. For this last year, we had a 1% cut for schools. This year, we have a 1.4% cut coming up. We have some time to work on this. I do think that a lot of the different temporary revenue sources that we've talked about and reallocation of some money are very appropriate, but I think it's going to take some time to figure that out. You're going to need our help as a school community if we're going to try to develop any more revenues, and I think we'll stand shoulder to shoulder with the legislature to try to do whatever we can to help that. whether it's permanent or temporary. We know that we have to do something for our capital construction and major maintenance. We've never had a funding source that's been dedicated to that. That needs to be separated out from our operations. We need to do a good job of keeping track of both sides of that so that we know exactly how much money we have on operations side and how much we have on CapCon. Again, it's very difficult as a school district and as school personnel to not have something that's predictable and reliable. We need that on both sides with the cuts and also with the revenues. So I guess I would encourage you to do the best job that you can, take some time. Like a lot of people have said tonight, we don't have to do anything right now. We can take the time to make the best decisions that we can. I know that you guys are under a lot of pressure to get things done, though. So with that, I'll take questions.
Questions for Dr. Brown? Thank you, Boyd.
Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Lisa England. I'm a parent of kids that have gone through this school district, Laramie County School District number 1. I'm currently employed with the school district, and I just have a quick question. I did not know, does the Wyoming Lotto have any percentage that would go to the school district? I know in Colorado they do. I didn't know if we were eligible for that at all. Just a thought.
Thank you. Anybody want to answer the Wyoming Lotto?
We've had
Mr.
that
Revenue?
discussion.
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead.
It wasn't me, he was down there. Mr. Chairman, it's Matt down here, sorry you can't
Matt
see me.
Will?
The lottery proceeds, the first $10 million go to the locals and distributed to local counties and towns. And then any proceeds above $10 million is then deposited currently into the common school account within the permanent land fund.
Matt, I don't mean to disagree, but isn't that $6 million?
What was that, Mr. Chairman?
I'm sorry, isn't that $6 million instead of $2 million?
Mr. Chairman, I think you are correct.
Thank you.
Okay, so is that a percentage or an actual dollar amount? Does it go up as the profits are made, or is it only a flat dollar amount?
Mr. Chairman, that it would, as the current statute is written, there is also a bill that is looking at changing that, the current structure of that, that has actually already passed the House and is headed to the Senate at this point. It would have been anything up and over $6 million would have gone to education. And after that, since that bill has now changed, actually there is nothing that goes out of that to the education system at this point. Now, just kind of give you a little bit of a reason why that is because we have never come close to the $6 million cap. The highest that we have seen for revenues coming off of that particular proceed is about $1.5 million distributed to the local economies. So it's a very, very small revenue stream.
So in answer to my question, it's a capped amount, is not a percentage of profit.
It is just a strict amount.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Nate Breen, member of Laramie County School District number 1, Board of Trustees. Regarding the revenue enhancements and revenue period, as a elected official, as you folks are, one of the things I've come to understand over the years is that there are difficult decisions that have to be made. And a lot of times, not a lot of times, most of the time, these decisions take courage. And when we start talking about taxes in Wyoming, the word tax tends to be an anathema, a curse to any person who's in political office in this state. But I believe part of your governance duty is to take a look and explore all possible means of revenue. And as Dr. Brown said much earlier, that as we talk about cuts in our education models, we need to also offset them with revenue. If revenue enhancement's going to be temporary, I agree entirely with Dr. Brown, then cuts should be temporary. If we're going to talk about immediate cuts, I would like to see immediate revenue. But again, this takes time, and as many folks said in the previous session, I'm for asking to put the foot on the brakes for a moment, and let's get this done right in a comprehensive way. Thank you, members of the committee. I stand for questions.
Questions for Nate? Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Ed Getz, Albany County School District. A little less popular subject. To read from a memo from your Legislative Service Office, quoting from the Washakie case, under the Wyoming Constitution, the legislature shall make such further provision by taxation or otherwise as with the income arising from the general school fund will create and maintain a thorough and efficient system of public schools adequate to the proper instruction of all youth of the state. The Wyoming Supreme Court stated that the legislature wields an apparent unlimited power under the state constitution in making such further provision by taxation or otherwise to fund schools. When the optional mills were declared unconstitutional in the mid-90s, and when the system changed for funding schools across the state through the School Facilities Department and Commission, effectively there was a pretty substantial cut across the state in taxes. There were optional mills across school districts in the state, anywhere from 3 to 6 mills between those two elements. And so effectively, Wyoming taxpayers in the last 15 plus years have seen a reduction in their taxes, but a substantial increase in the quality of education and the overall funding for education. And I certainly think that this is an area that should be explored by the legislature. There's certainly other options that can be considered, but you have the power to do so. Obviously, the ease of doing so isn't quite there, but the impacts to students and education are critical, and every option needs to be considered.
Thank you. Questions for Ed? Thank you. Anybody else want to talk about revenue? Okay, then we'll open it up to just general public comment. Anybody like to talk about general public comments? Any more? Go ahead, sir.
Good evening. I'm Bob Nelson from the Wyoming Liberty Group. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, thank you for this opportunity to comment and for the orderly and civil process that we engage in tonight. We stand in support of the concept of House Bill 236 with certain reservations. We agree with the very able and pragmatic leadership of the Wyoming Department of Education on an important point. It is indeed a slippery slope for us to depend on savings, as this bill calls us to do. Those savings took years to build. If we spend them now as a first response, we have no safety net later. It is uncertain whether this period of revenue contraction will get any worse. No one knows how long it will last. New taxes are extremely unpopular around the state, as you've heard earlier tonight. We agree, too, with our Education Department leadership on another point. We must not be hasty in our response to this crisis. However, hesitation and delay are even more disastrous because of the pace of events and the limits on our financial resources. In school year 2015-16, salaries and benefits were $1.2 billion, or 84% of Wyoming's K-12 spending. If meaningful cost reductions are to be made, they must start there, painful though they will be. That brings me to a third point on which we agree with our Education Department leadership. We must try to limit the consequences of changes upon school direct instruction activities because they are the essence of education and key to our NAEP scores. Therefore, the sharpest axe must fall elsewhere. HB 236 is a good first effort, having a range of cuts estimated to be $33 million in the first year. But this amount is not large enough and not soon enough because reliable reports project our education deficit will rise at the rate of at least $360 million per year for the foreseeable future. Also, diversions of other revenues to education disguise the issue of excessive spending. We don't want to go the way of New Jersey, Puerto Rico, Illinois, New York, or California. Wyoming's Constitution requires that our K through 12 education system be efficient. Now is the time to define and fulfill what that requirement means. We implore school districts and educators to offer serious, meaningful thoughts for solving our problems. As they shoot down the ideas of others, they do harm to our common cause of quality education and our children's financial future. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to.
Thank you, Bob. Any questions for Bob?
And I apologize for running over my time.
That's all right. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for this opportunity to speak. My name is Mariah Learned, and I am from Albany County School District. I work in an elementary school as a Title I reading and math interventionist. And I represent a group that we haven't heard from much tonight. I wasn't going to speak, but I'm an early career teacher. While I'm not a spring chicken, this is my second year as a teacher. And the cuts that we're talking about, while I know that there are going to be cuts that are necessary, I'm that excited, energized new teacher that wants to make a difference, that the cuts are going to have a direct effect on. And that may displace me, that may displace my family, but more importantly, it's going to have a huge impact on students. We are doing amazing work. And being able to keep those low class sizes and those lower ratios, especially in the K through 3 grades, is critical to maintaining and even increasing our success. If we're wanting to have our third graders be proficient grade level readers, we need to make sure that we're giving them the resources that they need, and that's teachers at a reasonable ratio. And I believe that the study that the state paid for absolutely speaks to that. The other point that I want to make is in support of instructional facilitators. We've heard testimony tonight that people are worried about losing the 5 days of professional development in terms of salary. I'm absolutely willing to give up that portion, especially if I have my instructional facilitator. Albany County is doing a wonderful job with that program. They have implemented it correctly. We have fabulous IFs in our buildings. I am able to get tailored professional development specific to my needs as an early career teacher, and also specifically tailored to the needs of my student and my position. That is a program that I feel strongly about. I think it was very prudent that they kept that funding outside of the model. I would love to see it stay there so that that resource can continue to be there for our students, our teachers, and please know it does have a direct impact on each of our students every single day. Thank you.
Thank you. Questions? Nobody? All right. Thank you very much. Go ahead, Bob.
Mr. Chairman, my name is Bob Worf, and I'm here for and on behalf of myself, but I was going to joke that I thought this was a meeting about the transfer of federal lands to the state, because that has been a pretty heated topic. But I do think it's something that I wish more people would have embraced. I do think, I've followed this issue for over 3 years. We're one of the only sportsmen's groups that supported the transfer. The media is well aware of that. They refuse to acknowledge or recognize that, but I think it's important. It can't be lost in this discussion. We have millions of dollars that leaves this state because we do not own our property, the lands within our state. And I do think that could be very beneficial to this state if we were to be able to be treated like the eastern states and have 100% control of the lands within our border and do away with some of the federal oversight, some of the restrictions we have. So I guess that's one of the things I would say, Mr. Chairman. In jest, I do stand here. I recognize we have a problem. I know that the transfer of public lands is a hot topic, but I do believe there is disparity between eastern states and western states, and I think we're seeing that in our education. I would much rather see it easier for people to spend money developing our resources in our state, and currently there's obstacles that make it easier for people to take their money and invest in other states. That takes businesses away from us, and it takes money out of our pockets. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would stand and just say that I do believe education is key, but I do think equality amongst all the states is equally key, and we can't lose sight of that, Mr. Chairman. Thank you,
Bob. Questions? Thank you.
I'll be quick, thank you. Chairman Northrup, I didn't know if we could ask questions, so I neglected to do so my first time, and I don't know if these handsome gentlemen can answer or if any of your committee can, but our district is unique in that fractional ADM will affect us differently than many other districts in the state, which is another plug for local control and why we should be allowed to make the cuts under our decisions. And my questions are, is there a minimum? So homeschooling, if we have homeschoolers taking a course, would that count as fractional ADM? Would online classes count toward fractional ADM? Is there a minimum? And if we offer more periods in the day than are required for graduation, is that possible as well? And I don't know if anyone can answer those questions for me.
Matt, you want to take a whack at it?
I got the last one wrong, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, my interpretation of the current way the amendment's drafted is that it's fractional based on hours or class periods. And so depends on if the student's enrolled in class periods or how the school district would count those. And so if a student's taking one class period or is enrolled in for a certain period of hours, it would be based on that fractional basis. I think that's the answer.
Thanks, Matt.
Thank you, Chairman Northrup. And I have one last question. Again, as a minority district that's seen 7% growth over the last year and a half, we're wondering if there's a provision in the bill for transportation freeze if we need to add bus routes for growth, if there's any provision for that.
I believe that there's going to be a hold harmless on transportation and that you can have, there'll be some allowance for that, yes.
Thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Anybody else? Any general comments? Any comments on the bill at all? Going once? Going twice? Anybody else? All right, we'll close up the public comment period and proceed to work the bill. Committee, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, could I make a couple general comments before we actually start working the bill?
Please do.
There are a couple of us up here that are also have the misfortune of being on the Revenue Committee. I don't know what we did to upset the leadership that we ended up both on education and on revenue, but I can tell you that, you know, we heard a lot of talk here this afternoon, at least some this evening, about raising taxes, and I can tell you that there's a lot of people out there with their hand out, and every time we talk about in the revenue side of things, there's a huge number of people that are objecting to every type of source of revenue that we have out there, and there's a huge number of people out there that are looking for an opportunity to dip into any money that we might raise through additional revenue. So when it comes to towns, the 99 towns and cities in the state of Wyoming, the 23 counties that we have in Wyoming, and all the other people that are wanting a piece of the pie, it's not that easy to raise revenue. So the next time we have a bill on the revenue side, which is probably too late now, but that you see we're raising revenue, I'd like to have the same group of people standing there in favor of raising revenue for education that makes our job a little bit easier. And another general comment, you know, just so you know that I'm not anti-education, I spent 34 years in education. Education in our family started with my grandmother, and now my granddaughter is doing student teaching at the University of Wyoming. I have 2 brothers, many nieces, nephews, so I understand the problems that we have here. But, you know, we're in a really tough spot right now. None of us would like to be here. We wouldn't like to be in this room sitting in front of you trying to justify the things that are outlined in this bill. But we're in a state that requires a balanced budget. We can't just go out and print money. And so you heard a previous testimony that we're outspending the amount of money we're taking in by $360 million a year. So I would have to differ with people that say that the problem can be delayed for any length of time, because we have no idea what's going to happen as far as the mineral extraction industry on down the road. If we continue at this rate, we're going to be sitting here like 3 years from now, and we're going to be dipping into that 85% of the budget that's spent on wages and benefits, and you're going to be really, really unhappy with us. So I think, I guess to finish up, I would say that making some modest cuts at this point in time could really save us a lot of grief down the road. And here's the other thing too that we need to consider. From the using the 05-06 school year until now, student population has gone up 12%. Budget for education's gone up 94%. And so it's hard for us to look other folks in the eye that have had to make some serious cuts and justify not making any cuts, holding the status quo. So we're in a really tough position. We wouldn't like to be here, and we certainly wouldn't want to be making the kind of cuts that we're asking for now. Our other dilemma is this. If we roll everything into the model and we ask you folks to make a reasonable cut that would be equal to what we're asking for here, will you guarantee me 100% that we won't be in a lawsuit? Because our legal folks have told us that by doing that, we leave ourselves some exposure. So, I'm willing to go that route if we don't get tied up for the next 2 or 3 years in a very expensive lawsuit. When it comes right down to it, what we have right now for an educational model came from lawsuits. That's how we got to where we are right now. And we don't need any more, and we've got to address this problem right now. If we can't raise revenue and make cuts within the next 18 months or so, we're going to be in a lot of trouble. So just asking for your indulgence. If that's the route you want to go, then let's not be having any lawsuits over it.
Thank you, Representative Paxton. I'd also like to just say that we've spent $550 million out of our school foundation reserve account that is basically our piggy bank. We broke the piggy bank for this year and for next year, and we added some extra money into it for next year. We took $100 million and threw it in. And there isn't very much left over when we got done with that. And so our school foundation piggy banks and all the little cash cans that we've got around have been used up on that. There's some other ones out there. We have the LSRA, it's a big one that we could dip into, and we actually have that into the bill. That's piggy bank is the next one we're going to dip into to get through this. And we're hoping to get to where we can recalibrate, not this summer, but the next summer. This summer, we're going to work on transportation and special ed. We feel those two have to happen right away. We've never done it before. We've always done 100% reimbursement. And so, therefore, those two just have to be done right away. Go ahead, Representative Kenner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and certainly thank you to you all for caring about our students and our future. Our students are our future, right? And so thank you for that. And I believe earlier it was Colby that said, let's do it together and don't do it to us. Well, I think we've been listening to that, and I think what I'd like to also do is thank those folks that 600 people commented on the white paper. So we've also listened to that. And how many comments were there, Chairman, on the thing? I know I've been reading them.
I counted 192 at 3 o'clock.
I thought there was close to 200. And so we have that. Now by doing it together, what I'm going to suggest as we begin to look at the bill, right now this is a discussion of our education committee. And so my thought in doing it together would be to do it together as the House of Representatives and talk to the rest of the body about it, because at this point it's really been us in consultation with others, but really the discussion has taken place here for the most part. And so my thought would be let's take these comments into consideration, certainly, but let's also now want to send it to the House so we can discuss this in a greater thing where folks who weren't able to travel here tonight can visit with their representatives and then pass that information on so that we can continue to try to do it together the best possible way that we can.
Thank you, Representative Kenner. Anybody else in the committee like to comment? Go ahead.
Mr. Chairman, First and foremost, I want to thank each and every one of you for taking time out of your Monday night, especially those that have traveled across the state, driven long distances to get here and provide us your input. It's crucial. The amount of notes I've taken tonight is incredible, and there's some recurring themes in these. And what I notice on these recurring themes is don't cut, don't cut, don't cut, don't cut. And I respect that. I respect where you're coming from. I think it's a very critical piece of this puzzle right now is that you guys are fighting for what you believe is right, and I believe that's admirable. I think what Representative Paxton said a little bit earlier is we've seen a very slight increase in student enrollment over the past 10 years and a drastic increase in expenditures. Now, that being said, we have also seen a very, very good return on our investment in some areas. Some of the information that was provided to us tonight shows us that we're still lagging. We're not hitting the areas that our fellow states to the north or to the west of us are hitting. We're not hitting the same graduation rates. We're not hitting some of those same areas. And we're spending 2.5, some even close to 3 times the amount of per pupil per year expenditures. And that's a lot of money. I grew up in this city here. I went to, it's the first time I've ever been on this stage. I used to sit out there. And as I went through this, I don't know how much they spent on me for education, but I don't believe it was anywhere near $16,000 per year. That's a lot of money. So when I look at some of these other school districts throughout Colorado that I've been looking into, and you see some of these that are doing the same, if not better, results for less than half of the budget, you start to wonder what's going on. And one of the biggest things that I've noticed is we have a very top-heavy system right now. It's incredibly top-heavy. We have superintendents, assistant superintendents, and business managers, and computer science or computer administrators that are all the way across this entire state right now that are gobbling up so much of the money that there is none left for the students. And so when we hear this, don't cut for students, don't cut this or you're going to impact the students, it's hard for us not to cut anything that impacts the students because all the money is already taken up at the top. And that becomes very, very difficult for us as legislators to figure out what we're going to do to be able to fund this. And we've heard it a few times tonight, and I thank you very much for the prayers because this has kept me up. This is not an easy situation, but what I think 236 does is this levels the playing field for us. This gives us a good start. This starts the conversation. It forms the same super committee that has been mentioned earlier tonight in the other bill that's running concurrently with this. This still forms that. This also gives us the opportunity to recalibrate our special ed and transportation this summer. Then it gives us the opportunity the following summer to recalibrate for everything else and make sure that we have everybody's input as we look forward and move forward with this process. This is a very, very critical time for Wyoming. And I'll tell you right now that the family who grabbed everybody's heartstrings here tonight, I have a personal connection to them. My wife actually was their son's para at McCormick Junior High. And when I heard them speak and saw him come up here, it got me teary-eyed. It really did, because I forget about those things. When we're sitting here looking at paper, it becomes very easy to start looking at cuts and not thinking about a face that are attached to those cuts. And I know Caleb and I know his parents very well, and it was touching to see them come here and bring that back to reality a little bit. But I appreciate all of your input and everything that you have here, and I know you guys recognize what a tough job we have here. But Mr. Chairman, with that, I guess I'd like to move the bill personally. I'd like to move this forward, and I'd like to work this.
Before we do that, anybody else want to comment? Go ahead, Representative Freeman.
I'm a longtime teacher, and I remember life before 05, 06. At that time, I got about a 17% raise. Before I got that raise, I was living paycheck to paycheck. I was trying to put money into the bank to where that I would have the three-legged stool to where I could enjoy retirement, and I could only probably put in about 1/3 to 40%. In my opinion, Wyoming balanced the budget on the backs of teachers for years. And what happened is we got an influx of mineral monies, and we actually started to pay teachers what the going rate was, above the going rate. But before that, I seen many young teachers that would come in for 2 to 3 years and get out because they couldn't live on that. I stayed in it because I had the golden handcuffs. Wyoming retirement system is one of the best systems in the country. And hopefully, well, I guess I'm taking advantage of it now, but now I have 2 full-time, part-time jobs. I'm convinced we have to do cuts. They're all painful, and I don't want to do them. And I don't want them to go into classrooms, and I don't want to start to balance the budget on the backs of the employees of the school district. I don't have the answer. This is a practical way to get to the first step. How much of this we're going to do, I don't know. I don't know how much we have to. But we're in a situation that we didn't expect even 2 years ago. And it could change very quickly. But if we do nothing and pray to the oil gods and the coal gods and the gas gods, my guess is we won't be answered in the way that we anticipate. We have to take care of ourselves, and we have to do it as a group. Because if we impose things onto you, that isn't the right thing to do. And I also know that the best way to take care of students is to take care of the people that deal with them every day. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You're welcome. Anybody else? Comments? Representative Pete Braden.
Being that some men see the same subject in different lights, I hope it doesn't prove disrespectful if entertaining as I do opinions that are different than some of the things you've heard today. I've been thinking about this meeting most of the day and most of the night. And this morning I woke up about 3 o'clock and I got what I thought was some insight into what's been going on here. And when John Glenn was waiting to be fired into orbit above Friendship 7 in 1962, there was a single person he relied on with the complex trajectory computations needed to bring him down securely from his orbital space flight. She was an African American, a mathematician who operated in NASA's Segregated West Location Computer Systems Department. Get the smart lady. Examine the numbers, Glenn stated prior to boarding the rocket. I'm excellent to go if she states they're great. Before we launch Wyoming education into a much different orbit, which will be every bit as precarious and having a great potential for disaster, like John Glenn said, I say, get the smart lady. Let's examine the numbers again. You, my dear friends, are the smart ladies. You were almost an afterthought in all of this and should have been there at the beginning. We need to involve the stakeholders that are seriously affected, the ladies, if you will, into the launch and laying of a new frontier of Wyoming's education. Things are going to be different.
Thank you, Representative Pete Braden. Anybody else? All right, committee, what's your pleasure?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move the bill.
Bill's, go ahead.
Second.
All right, bill's been moved by Brown, seconded by Representative Freeman. As you see, there's an amendment that was presented to you. It's actually a cleanup amendment. Matt, you want to go through that?
Mr. Chairman, I'll go through it real quick. The intent of this amendment is not to change any of the substance that we talked about earlier. As you said, it's more intended as a cleanup and to precise some of the language. And I'll just kind of walk through real generally here. On page 1, the changes to lines 2, 3, and 4. Those are just changes to the title, kind of give it more clarity as to what's included within this bill, make it a little more specific. The previous title was very broad. The change to page 1, line 15, this is we're changing how we are doing some of the transportation freeze, changing that language, and so that's just to reflect that in the elements affected section. Over to page 2, lines 1 and 2, again, that's change to how the sales tax is put into the bill, and so just reflecting that in the elements affected. Page 2, line 18, this is clarifying the transfer from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account. Again, making clear that that occurs after all the appropriations to that account from that account for the year have been taken into effect. Then there would be that transfer, and again, to clarify that it's the unobligated, unencumbered balance within the account, within the school program account. The next change is on page 5. This restates the ADM fractional basis. Again, this is it's intended to be the same as explained earlier, just precises that language up, calculate the ADM. The next change, page 7, lines 11 through 18. This is, again, this is that 1% severance tax, and transferring an equal amount from the general fund to the school foundation program account. Again, just same thing, slightly different language. The change to page 10, lines 10 through 12. This is the alternative school moratorium. Again, just changing how we say that, but at the same intent as discussed before. Page 13, lines 1 and 2. This is the court-ordered placement students, and again, just making that language a little more clear. Page 13, lines 7 through 23, and continuing over to page 14, lines 1 through 9. This changes the how the transportation freeze goes into effect. And you can see it's a little bit longer, but again, intended to be the same thing, freezing for school year 2018-2019. Mr. Chairman, then on page 3 of the amendment, change to page 14, starting at line 15. This is also changing the special education freeze. Again, intended to be the same effect, just a little more precise. Mr. Chairman, then on page 17, starting on line 4, this is just a little cleanup. This is in the sales tax portion. The biggest change were lines 9 through 19, adding a new subsection J, clarifying when that would be sunsetted. Page 19, line 2, starting on line 2, that amendment is making the same changes to the use tax that we made to the sales tax, as well as referencing again when that would sunset off. on page 22. Line 4, again, this is just, since we have multiple effective dates, just making clear which effective date we're talking about, as well as cleaning up the effective date of that specific section versus the act as a whole. And that continues on through, there's a few of those, page 29, same thing, and page 30. And page 30, line 22, this changes some of the effective dates. It makes I guess the one change here, we're making the alternative school moratorium effective immediately, along with the transportation that was previously done. And that's the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Josh. Committee, you've heard the amendment. What's your pleasure on the amendment?
Mr. Chairman.
Chair, I'd move the amendment.
Second.
Moved by Hunt, seconded by Brown. Any discussion on the cleanup amendment? None appearing, we'll proceed to vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you. We've worked the amendment, the cleanup amendment into the bill. Committee, do you have any other amendments?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Brown.
When we talk about special education funding, as we heard tonight, it's a very critical component, and I think I've been approached, partially the reason why I was late getting back in here to testimony, was hearing some other testimony about keeping the maintenance of effort guarantee. And I don't know if we need to include this. I guess I would defer maybe to maybe the attorney on staff here, or if we need to put something in this that guarantees that we maintain our maintenance of effort at this point for SPED funding, even through the freeze. I want to make sure that we don't leave any of these kids that truly need this funding. I don't want to leave any of them behind. I don't want to leave any funding off the table for them, nor for us. So I guess I would like to find out whether or not the language that we have in here works for that, or if we need to write an amendment that would guarantee that.
Matt or Josh?
Mr. Chairman, the language in here provides that the actual school year 16-17 amounts will be then funded in 2018-19. So the maintenance of effort amount should be matched. And there's also provision that the out-of-district placements are then 100% reimbursed. We can certainly check with the Department of Ed to see if they have any issues with the maintenance of effort and come back either on committee of the whole or a second reading or third reading to offer any proposed amendments. But our understanding is that the 2016-17 actual expenditures will then be reimbursed under current law next school year, and then that amount then will be forwarded for this school year 2018-19. So the maintenance of effort amount will be hopefully the same, or it may be a little bit higher with the out-of-district placements as well.
Thank you. Representative Freeman?
Thank you. Matt, how much money do we save by freezing SPED Ed for 2 years, 1 year, whatever it is?
Mr. Chairman, the 1 year freeze, and this is not taking into consideration any changes to the recalibration that's contemplated in this next interim, would be about $10 million.
You said about 10?
Mr. Chairman, that's correct.
Thank you. Anybody any questions?
Yes, Mr.
Go
Chairman.
ahead, Representative Bovee.
I'm going to use my new to this to show my ignorance right now. But when I look at this bill, it looks like there's 3 issues here. There's the revenue portion where we need to enhance revenue that's in here. There's the cuts part, and then there's the super committee to allow for time to dig deep, right? So I'm a little unclear on how to work this, but listening to what people are saying, it seems to me that what we need to do, and I don't know how to do it, so I'm just going to spit out the whole ignorant thing, okay? I believe we need to move the revenue portion forward. We have to start enhancing the revenue. From what I'm hearing out here, I think that our job could be easy if we just let the districts know the percentage of cuts and they decide how to deal with that. And then move the super committee forward. That's what I'd like to do. I don't know how to do that. So can we do that? That's my question.
Yes, we can, if everybody agrees. So, moving revenue forward, let me just touch on that one briefly. As it is now, in the way that the bill's phrased, the half-cent tax would not go into effect until we spent the LSRA, LISRA, down to the $500 million. At that time, it would kick in and would replenish the account until it reached a point that where we didn't need it anymore, basically. Okay. 65%. Yep. Okay. As far as the percent cut goes, that's up to the committee. And a super committee is already in the bill, and that's part of the bill. I mean, we can move that forward without any problem. So there's portions of the bill that are very easy to not put in, but to move forward with.
Right.
And if we need to, we can make a conceptual amendment, and we could work it tomorrow night. If everybody, I don't know what your schedule's like tomorrow night, but.
Well, I'm working for you right now.
There you go. Thank you. Okay. Committee, any other thoughts?
Mr. Chairman.
Go ahead, Representative Brown. Almost said Bovee.
I guess I agree with Representative Bovee on this. But we're really not seeing a revenue increase here. I think that's kind of an important piece of this. We're spending from savings. That's not a revenue increase. That's robbing Peter to pay Paul at this point. So I think the super committee that's in here is going to be tasked with looking at additional revenue sources. And I think that is probably one of the most critical pieces of this bill that has probably not been talked about a whole bunch. We talked about the other super committee bill that's kind of running in tandem with this, but I think it's critically important that we understand we're not actually doing any revenue increases right here until we get below $500 million in our rainy day fund. And basically that would be about $1 billion spent right now before we get to that point, not including any other governmental spending that's going to take out of that same pot of money. We've spent a lot of money out of that already. So I guess I don't know that we've really hit the nail on the head that we're going to start raising revenue at this point on this bill. We've given the super committee that task. And I think what this has given, again, is us a level playing field, if you will, for not only a few cuts, but also looking at some of these other areas to look into as we move forward.
Yes, so if you'll turn to page 25 on the bill, Representative Brown, you'll see that options 1 is the use of saving, that's the small I. Romanet double I is consideration use of diversions of existing revenue streams and investment income. And of course, Romanet 3 is options to increase revenues. And so that's all been given by the super committee, and that will take place not this summer, but next summer as the bill's written.
Yep.
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead, Representative Paxton.
Well, as you know, I'm a local control guy, and I really believe in that, but I don't want to get us in too much trouble. But I don't have a problem endorsing an amendment that would give local control over the cuts equivalent to what we've outlined here in this bill. But I think that if we do that, we need to have that out into the public in time for us to make comments or hear comments on it, and also to seek counsel from our legal folks that are sitting out there with a smile on their face to give us some advice and make sure that we're on solid legal ground if we do that. But so I don't know how you might want to do that. Do you want a motion for an amendment, or how do you want to do that? Or do you have an amendment already written out?
I don't have anything at all. I'm just looking for input from the committee. Is that what the committee would like to do, is have a percent cut that is equal to the dollar amount that the cut is in the back of this bill? in the summation page.
Mr. Chairman,
Representative Brown.
just a quick question. I guess, are we going back to the back page here, the K-12 funding impact? And are we saying that we, in school year 17-18, we'd like to see a $33.2 million reduction, and then 18-19, we'd like to see a 67.8? Is that, and we're just divvying that up as a equitable cut across, or how are we looking at doing that?
Yes, and I would also like to mention that 1.4% that we had last year is also another cut that's somewhere out there. So we have a 0.4 coming this year.
Mr. Chairman, if you recall, we asked in a previous meeting about allowing local control and cutting a percentage, and our legal counsel advised us that that would be a slippery slope. So that seems to be the general consensus statewide. That's what they would prefer. But again, I would prefer to hear from legal counsel before we go that far, and I think that the general public should be aware of that as well. And I know that we're not taking any more public comment at this point, but.
Well, we can certainly ask Mr. O'Donnell if he'd like to comment on that. And
Aren't you glad I put you on the spot?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Representative Flitner. To reiterate what I've advised this committee, the body of the legislature, and in fact the entire state for some time now, you have three fundamental obligations under the Constitution. The first is to describe the education that will be provided to Wyoming kids. The second is to figure out how to deliver that education. And the third is to pay for whatever it costs to do so. You are talking now about doing something that probably will not satisfy those obligations. If you decide that the basket of goods can only be delivered, or will be delivered in a given way, and you put all of those elements into the basket of goods, which we call the model, and then you choose not to fund the model, it's pretty clear that you have not fulfilled your third obligation, the third leg of the stool that holds up the constitutionality of the system. I recognize fully that tonight virtually all of the comments you received were in support of a generalized reduction in funding that allowed the districts to maintain some discretion and control at their level. And I'm very sensitive to that, and I get it. What I don't want to do, though, is see this body and the legislature in the state of Wyoming set up for failure in a lawsuit because of trying to accommodate a realistic desire for more flexibility. Representative Freeman, I recall you asking every single person in this room that very question, and it's very nice to hear people say, well, we don't want to sue and we just want to have that flexibility. I suspect when things get tight and boards of trustees are making decisions about whether or not to sue the state, that equation may change. So I urge extreme caution in approaching your conversations that way.
Mike, when we opened up the attachment A and went in and started cutting on, like, for example, superintendent and business manager salaries, did we not open ourselves up to the same?
Yes, you did, Mr. Chairman. Or you have. I guess it's not done yet. You bet. Recall also that in my presentations to you, I have said that you can make changes to how your model is delivered, but I recommend extremely strongly that you do so with empirical support. You have empirical support in various locations accessible to you now that include your recalibration reports over the years from your recalibration efforts. There is also support out there in the educational literature. You have a vast array of knowledge accumulated in your school districts. There are places where that empirical support can be obtained, but just making number cuts for the sake of making cuts takes you into dangerous territory.
Further questions for
Mr. Chairman?
Go ahead.
I believe Mr. Speaker would like to.
Go ahead, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Chairman, just if you would allow the privilege, I know you've closed public comment, but if I could just address the committee, and I think just to kind of bring this back, and first of all, really, as you stated, Chairman, I really appreciate the way you've run this meeting and appreciate all of you here tonight, but all the folks who've traveled here, I mean, that's what it's really about. And I think this process, we've gotten so much good public input. You've stated that, I mean, the 600 comments on the white paper, the 200 comments we've gotten in the last few days. So here we are at 9 o'clock at night. And we've got a 5-part plan, you know. This plan, one part is some reductions. And we're struggling with that. It's not easy. And then we've got this this guaranteeing of the full 5% of the spending policy. That's another part, because this is a $400 million problem per year. And so, and I think it's so important. I mean, 1 cent of sales tax is $150 million. So you have to raise 2.5 cent sales tax to tax our way out of it. We're not going to cut our way out of it. I mean, you could say, well, we'll close every small school. That's why it costs $16,000 a year to educate kids. It doesn't cost that much in Cheyenne. But we're not in the business of shutting down small town Wyoming. Do we want to shut down Pine Bluffs, bus them here every day? Sure we could. Save tons of money. Close down Midwest, Shoshone, Lima, Mountain View, up to Newcastle, all that stuff. That's not what we're here for, and people wouldn't go for that. So we're going to have an expensive system. But I think what I heard tonight from a lot of people, and I think, so here's this 5-part plan. Reductions of $80 million approximately over time. The spending policy adjustment of $80 million. This 1% statutory severance, which is not easy to do, whether members will agree with that, to funnel that through the general fund, that's not easy. There's a lot of demands on that money as well, on the other side of the budget. And then we talk about this revenue piece, and then frankly spending our savings. And actually the revenue comes after we spend our savings down. And so really these last 2 pieces are spending our savings, and then we'll kick in this revenue piece. A 0.5 cent sales tax is $80 million a year. So as we've listened to this bill, I've listened to it many times, and I've listened to it for months. You know, in the last month, it's really the white paper. So here we are, 9 o'clock at night, and I think with all this great public comment, with 800 comments, I don't think you're going to solve it all tonight at 9 o'clock. And I guess I would just say what Representative Pipperinen said a half hour ago. I think we want to make sure we got the numbers right. I think we want to double check, and because when you hear the 94% on 12%, I don't think that's the right number. That's the state guarantee number. But the guarantee's gone up because the 31 local mills have gone down, right? And we've got 12,000 more customers, or 10,000 more, and 12,000 more at-risk customers. So all that stuff, we got to kind of know a little more, and we're going to keep working this. That's the process. And so do I think this bill is the best idea out there? Sure. Are there more ideas? Probably. But how do you get to $400 million a year? I think this is the best start. But I think there's a few of these intricacies. Maybe we sleep on it instead of trying the bill in here at the microphone and asking legal advice. I think we maybe sleep on it a little bit and let our staff go to work on this and let us work this process. We've got a couple more days now to kick it out on the floor of the House, and then let the 60 members of the House be the super committee and and they'll hear from all the people. People will drive this. And so that's all, I guess, what I'm saying. I go back to what Representative Pipperinen said, and I think we want to make sure we got all the numbers right and make sure we've sat down and we've got all this right. And we understand what every comma and period in that bill is going to do, because it's going to be really important. And, you know, failure is not going to be an option. And so I would just say, Mr. Chairman, I just congratulate you and your committee. I think you've done yeoman's work tonight. I think the people who drove here out on a winter night to Cheyenne East, as an Natrona County Mustang, it's probably not my favorite school. But we really appreciate the folks here at Cheyenne East letting us use their home here, and it's a beautiful school and beautiful auditorium and beautiful setting where people could come here. And so I appreciate all that. So this is part of the process. And so as we work this process, I would just say to all the folks who are here, and boy, stay involved in the process. That's what it's all about. And we got to trust the process and keep working it and keep bringing our ideas forward. So that's my only thing is I've sat and listened all night. I don't think we're going to go till midnight tonight and solve this. And probably a good night's sleep and some fresh minds and a little time, we're going to get a better solution. So thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Okay, committee, I too would like to have a chance to look at this with my eyeballs closed and think about it again. What's your tomorrow look like? How's tomorrow afternoon after adjournment look?
Committee.
We have 2 with committee. Anybody else have committee down there?
I'm just working for you, man.
Okay. Which committee is it?
Transportation. Probably proxy vote and work this if we need to. There's some pressing, Mr. Chairman, there's some pressing issues in transportation, but I don't know that they quite equal a $400 million education shortfall, so.
Well, I would say that let's, upon adjournment, let's get together in, Matt, can we get in 37, House 37?
Mr. Chairman, we'll have to look at the calendar and we'll work with staff to see what the availability of rooms are.
That's it, and none of us have a calendar in front of us or a schedule, so.
You mean tomorrow?
It'll be to be announced then. We'll leave it at that. Upon adjournment, we'll tackle this subject again and see what we can do. And until then, let's table this motion, table House Bill 236 until that time.
So move.
Second.
Then moving seconded. All those that approve, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right.
Thank you,
We'll see you
everybody.
tomorrow night. Thank you.
Thank you to you guys.